Ah, hello, folks. It's me, Lunchbox, once more. I have not streamed in quite a while, as you might have noticed by the fact that I haven't had streams up. But Kiara getting back into wanting to play Red Dead after GTA made me think, well, I should probably replay Red Dead as it's been a few years. And in that, I would like to, get. I have gotten new headphones and with a built-in mic that are different from my old headphones with a built-in mic. Is this one better? No idea. Was my old mic terrible? Maybe. Who knows? But basically, while playing the game, I kind of was going through when I first played the game when it came out in 2018, and I played it a lot since then. But let's see, a bit distance. I wonder how I could affect that. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see how. Uh, yeah, let's see. Well, I really have no idea how to affect the difference between mics in OBS. It is peaking a bit, so let me turn that down slightly, see if that affects it in any way. Maybe I was getting too much into it. But I guess, yeah, we might just have to roll with that, because as I said, I have no idea how to even begin to adjust that. But, anyway, okay, yeah, that was me turning it down, so let me go back up. I guess, yeah, we'll just have to roll with scuffed audio then, because that's the best I got. But let's see. So, I've prepared, as any good, PNG tuber should, I've prepared a tier list. Now, this is, the guns in the game are all actually they're all mostly modeled very well. Stat-wise, they're a little different, and that's kind of what we're going to be getting into. There's two factors at play here. There's basically, I guess you could say three factors at play here. One is going to be the model. Two is going to be, which I think is maybe the most important. Two is going to be historical availability, which is going to be something to discuss and get into. And then three is going to be performance based on his actual in-game performance in relation to its real-life performance. And kind of the balance of those two things. So, I guess we'll start off with. We're gonna go through the different weapon types, of which I have all of them in the game, and I've already customized them to make them look as. Because you can customize the guns to varying degrees. I've all set these up in the way that is most alike to how you would buy them from the factory at the time of their release, like IRL. And then we're going to go through each section of weapons and then discuss that. And I'm going to go through them not in order of how you unlock them in the game, but in order of their, like, IRL historical implementation. So, back to the game here. I've come up to the. You can see my. I'm at a part of the game where you play as John, and I'm all Mountain Man John'd up, as you can see here. Yeah, full with my fox hat and my legendary bear coat and all that. But yeah, so going through the historical. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. So the oldest gun, actually no, second oldest gun in the game, is this. Let's hop into first person here. And then we'll go to maintain. So this is a Lamont revolver. Okay? Now, a Lamont revolver is a very weird, interesting gun. It is the only single-player gun in this game that is in cap and ball. So pre-Civil War, revolvers, for about the first 15 to 20 years of revolver's existence, they didn't take modern bullets. You had to load each chamber like a musket and then put a cap on the back. You can see the brass caps there. Now, what made the Lamont very weird? The Lamont was actually invented by, if I remember correctly, it was a dentist who was a French dentist who had an idea that was very, very bizarre. So you can see on the Lamont, there's the barrel, but then under the barrel, there's like a very big tube. His idea was, so revolvers, have to revolve. And to revolve, they have to revolve what is called an arbor pin, which is the, rod that goes through the middle of the cylinder that they spin on, kind of like an axle. But his idea was you could make an arbor pin that is also a shotgun. Very strangely. So, on Lamont revolvers, the arbor pin is a 20-gauge shotgun barrel. Actually, I think it's more like a 16, actually, come to think of it. But, doing this stretches out the cylinder, from a normal cylinder size to where it is actually, it is now a 9-shot, rather than a usual 5 or 6 shot of the period. Now, these were very late 1850s is when they began development, and being French, he had a lot of connection to Louisiana, so therefore, when the Civil War started, a lot of Lamonts were issued to Confederate cavalry forces, because the way that cavalry worked in the Civil War and much of the 1800s was you'd go in, you'd ride up to usually less defended areas, like artillery emplacements, things like that, fire all the ammo you have, and then ride away really quick. So, while your standard infantry would have, at the time of the Civil War, like a musket, single shot, 3 shots a minute or so, cavalry were more focused on repeating firepower, and we're going to get into that later. You're going to see more guns that were built specifically with cavalry in mind later as I continue going through this. So, carbines, light repeating carbines, or revolvers were really pushed on cavalry. A lot of cavalry, what are called horse pistols, which is big cap and ball revolvers that would be carried on saddles. There would be holsters not on your hip, but on your saddle. And you'd have your 2 pistols in that. And you'd ride up, pull out both your pistols, so now you have about 12 shots with standard sidearms. But you have 18 pistol rounds with the Lamont, plus the 2 shotgun shells. Well, not shells, shotgun loads. You'd unload those and then ride away. And then, reload them off the battlefield. But, yeah, seeing how... So, historically, yeah, there weren't many Lamonts. I believe only about 3,000. But, technically speaking, in the late game of Red Dead Redemption, set in around the turn of 1900, yeah, you could potentially find a Lamont going around. They would probably still be in service. Now, Implementation of the game. Let's see. Uh, the model is almost perfect. The loading lever, you can see on the right side of the gun, that weird like thing that's attached to there. That should be on the left side of the gun. So the gun is kind of mirrored incorrectly. Uh, but for the most part, it's pretty good. You can see here. You can see the percussion cap on the right is now gone. You can see it actually breaking. That is correct historically. That is what percussion caps are supposed to do. Old Colt revolvers had a very bad issue of the percussion cap fragments getting caught in the mechanism. So that's kind of an issue people had with Colts. So as you can see, 9 shots. But then here's where kind of an issue with the game gets up. But this is for balance. How many shots? We have 1 more shot left. So after I fire this shot, you're going to see me reload. Now, what you would have to do IRL, you can see, again, good, I only have 1 percussion cap left on the gun. Now, what you would have to do IRL is, well, we kind of, so you know with a musket, you imagine a musket as being like, okay, you pour the powder down, and then you put the ball in, and then you put the cap on. And by the time of the Civil War, that was actually not as much the default as you would imagine. People would make paper cartridges, almost the same kind of paper you make, like tea bags are made of, or like cigarettes are made of, like very thin. And you would basically make a gunpowder cigarette, and then put the bullet in the end of it, right? And you'd carry these around in like a little box. And then you'd take them out and shove them into the chamber, and then put the cap on back. It's not as, obviously it's not as good as, you know, like a modern bullet, but it's much better than, say, like 100 years previously when you had to pour the gunpowder down the barrel with a horn and then put the bullet on and then get the ramrod out. But watch how they kind of animate it in the game. Okay, putting the percussion caps on, but then you just kind of hit the loading lever. So so to make it slightly more balanced, you don't actually ever put the bullets in the barrel, well, in the cylinder for some reason. You just kind of act like the percussion cap is all you need on the gun. Now, obviously, if you didn't do that, it would, like IRL, no one reloads percussion revolvers in a fight. If you were to load a Lamont revolver, it would take over a minute to reload this thing. And obviously you can't have that in a game, so they kind of cheat a bit. By having you, well, one, the reload is just very fast to begin with. It's like 2 times what it should actually be. And also the, like I said, you don't actually load the cylinder. One other thing, these, like I said, are black powder. So, like, hold on. You notice there was some flash and a little bit of smoke there? That is, I should be standing in, like, a smoke bomb right now, the way black powder works. Like, there's a reason why modern gunpowder is called smokeless powder, is because black powder is, like plumes of smoke. If you were in, like, a saloon and, like, a gunfight happens, it would be, like, it would be, like, thick in the air. Like, so that's kind of something the game doesn't really do as much, which I wish it did, because I feel like there was plumes of smoke. A lot of Hong Kong action movies, actually, really kind of overuse, like, they'll put, like, more black powder in the blanks. John Woo does it a lot in, what's it called? Hard Boiled. Especially with shotguns, so you really feel the oomph of the shot coming out. Now, again, the fun thing with the Lamont, as you can see, that little hammer pull there. Let me see, can I view the, can I view it with the hammer up? I can. So do you see how that hammer had that little lever that I flipped there? that now is having. You can see the additional percussion cap down at the bottom there. Now that hammer is focused on that percussion cap, which that now fired the underbarrel shotgun that exists on this. And you would load that again like it was a blunderbuss or something. And this does it pretty well. You pull out the little lever on the front, you pull the front out to kind of ram it down. Like I said, you load it a bit fast, but it's kind of accurate to how it is IRL. So overall, we'll come back to our thing. I'm gonna go with an A for the Lamont. It has a few issues, but it's pretty much there. Also, I'm calling it the Lamont because that's what Americans call it, but it's actually more like the Lemay or something because remember French. But yeah, that is pretty decent. Okay, so now we're gonna go with the first gun you get in the game, which is the Cattleman. Now I have two Cattlemans to kind of show you two different kind of configurations you could get like IRL. So the Cattleman is kind of the first successful. Well, the Cattleman. So this is a thing that is in Red Dead. A lot of the Red Dead guns that are part of companies that still exist today do not have their real names for the most part. This is a Colt single action army revolver. Now these are still manufactured and sold by Colt. So they've renamed it to the Cattleman, which is actually the name of, if you want to buy an Italian reproduction of this gun by the company Uberti, it will be called an Uberti Cattleman. I actually have a Beretta licensed version of the Uberti Cattleman called a Beretta Stampede in real life. Though mine, I'll discuss that in a moment. You can see this is pretty good model-wise. It is modeled as a kind of later pattern. Post-1870s, but still within the realm of, accuracy of 1880, pre-1900 frame, but post-1870s frame. This is with the longer barrel, and it's a bit too long. This is about, this looks like it's a 9-inch or so barrel. You could custom order 9-inch barrels from the Colt factory. Well, let me add a little historical context first. So, this is the first kind of big bore cartridge revolver. Cartridges has existed for about 10 years prior to this. But there was a guy named Roland White, who Roland White wanted to make a cap and ball revolver that loaded from the back. And it was a very weird, bad idea that would not work. But he got a patent for it. And part of his patent was taking a cylinder that had holes for the cartridges going completely through it. Now, in the cap and ball days, this was a very stupid idea that no one cared for. The thing is like 2 years after his patent was issued, cartridges got invented. And cartridges need the cylinder completely bored through. So it was like, okay, now this guy's sitting on like the patent gold mine of how guns need to work now. But Smith & Wesson bought his rights to this, and only Smith & Wesson could make bored through cylinders throughout the 1860s. So through the 1860s, Smith & Wesson made a few. Well, we'll come back to that. I'll come back to Smith & Wesson in our next gun, because that is a Smith & Wesson. Basically, by the early 1870s, the patent runs out Colt can now take its standard revolver lock work and apply all the now open patents of the 1860s onto it, and that's where we get the single action army. It is a 6-shot in 45 Colt and a few other cartridges that I'll maybe discuss later. And it was initially sold to the Army and the Cavalry. This kind of configuration is what you would what you would normally get if you were in, say, the Cavalry at the time. The long barrel, like I said, this barrel in the game is about 8 or 9 inches. That's a little too long. 7.5-inch barrels is where the Cavalry would have it. But blued finish, wooden grip, and like I said, it is 6-shot. Just, your standard, about as simple as a gun could be using a cartridge mechanism. Now, with the reload, you'll see... oh, yeah, you are seeing the tier list. I forgot about that. Okay, back to this. So, yeah, here's what I was saying about mostly... Yeah, here's what a single action army looks like. That's my other single action army. One sec. Yeah, here's what a single action army of Cavalry Providence would look like. Now, like I said, the barrel is about 1 inch too long, but this overall, kind of configuration is what the Army was buying in the 1870s, so like the U.S. Army. And some Canadian Mountie forces were also purchasing. But yeah, like I said, much like the Lamont, not enough smoke. There should be plumes of smoke coming out of this. Now, you're going to see on the reload here, the reload is accurate in how it is done. In that you have to knock out a cartridge and then put a new cartridge in. It is just way too fast. But again, that is for balance. Now, I have another cattleman here, customized slightly different. This is more of something you'd see on a civilian kind of configuration. As you can see, shorter barrel. The one I have IRL has this barrel length of 5.5 inch. Here's nickel plated. Before modern, so to prevent rust, there's a few methods. You could blue it, which bluing is actually rusting the gun and then removing the surface rust, so you have kind of a pre-rusted thin layer that turns the gun kind of almost black. And this makes it much less easy to rust than if it was just what is called in the white, meaning that it is just the bare metal. Now, what is even better is to coat the metal. And we have modern coatings, things like Cerakote and stuff, where it's almost like a chemical paint that gets applied to the gun. But in the 1870s, the best they had was nickel plating. So not only does nickel plating look fancy, but it also when you look at the very expensive guns, like engraved ones and stuff, they'll be nickel plated most of the time because it looks nice. But you will also find nickel-plated guns on guns that are like frontiersmen's guns and things like that. Because while being slightly more expensive, it offers much, much, much better protection against the elements, such as the snow that I'm in and whatnot. Let's see. So now, also being purchased by the U.S. Cavalry at the time, were Schofields, of which I have 2 to show 2 different examples. Well, actually, no, the tier list. Let's go back really quick. So, the single action army. Oh yeah, a big issue with the single action army in the game that I forgot to mention. What It historically perfect. It would be the most common fighting revolver of this era. Presentation in game also perfect. Uh, like model wise, the one barrel a little too long, but pretty good. Balance wise, uh, is where we get kind of weird. Of all of the revolvers in this game, the single action army should be the most powerful by a decent margin. 45 Colt is very strong. Remember, these are made for cavalry officers. Uh, yeah, I'll get back to the, because we'll talk about nickel plating again when we get to the Schofield next. But with the single action, uh, the, remember, these are made for U.S. cavalry. So the idea, who are at this time fighting indigenous people, Native Americans, in a lot of horse combat. Think like Little Bighorn and stuff. Little Bighorn was 3 years after this gun was adopted. So what you want to do in this era is you want to have a pistol that you can reliably kill an enemy horse with. You don't have to kill the guy riding the horse, because if you shoot a horse that is riding at full speed, the guy riding the horse is going to fall off horribly and probably not want to continue fighting after hitting the ground. So revolvers meant for the cavalry of this era are built to be in a kind of strength to, like, the requirement is, can this incapacitate a horse? And so the single action army is built to those, like, requirements, but in the game it's very middling in its damage. This is the closest thing to a Magnum revolver, but it is kind of the weird thing that happens with video game guns. So you see this in a lot of games where the game wants to have the most common guns be represented as you would expect, You're seeing a Western. You expect everyone to go around carrying single action armies. It's like if they made a Vietnam video game. You'd expect M16s to be prevalent, The issue is that, or like a lot of World War II video games, obviously you're going to use the M1 Garand, all those kind of things, The issue is that the reason why these guns were so prevalent is because they were very good. Like, they were some of the best options you could have. But you don't want to make the most common gun the best option you can have, so you kind of have to nerf it. So it ends up, the guns, you get a kind of thing where rare guns in real life are rare because they probably aren't that good. The common guns are the good ones because people buy the good ones. Where in games, the rare guns are the good ones because you want to get that special rare gun, so you kind of get a flipped inverse. So the single action army has very low damage in the game because it is the common, like, everyman gun of the game. So that kind of brings it down a bit in the tier list, because like I said, this should be like the man-stopper magnum of the game when it comes to revolvers. But, yeah, let's go back to talk about the other, technically, I kind of mentioned that the single action army was kind of the first big fighting revolver. This is actually a bit before that. So back with the Roland White patent, right? Smith & Wesson controlled the ability to make bored-through-cylinder revolvers. The first models that they had in the 1860s, this is a very fun, weird naming convention that I love and hate at the same time. The first one was what is called a tip-up. So do you see? You can see. Oh wait, no, I forgot to switch from OBS again. But early enough this time. Okay. So this is Well, I'll get to this. Do you see the hinge there? Like on the bottom of the frame, a little bit in front of the trigger, there's the circle with the screw in the middle. That is a hinge that opens the gun up from the top. That used to be on the older models on the back of the gun, where the hammer is. So you'd pull the barrel up above the gun, so then it was then facing you, and like it's kind of hard to visualize and explain. You then pull the cylinder off and then like punch out the rounds. But anyway, they're called tip ups, and they're from a historical thing that is not quite right now. But the first one is called the Smith & Wesson #1. Yeah, you'd pull the cylinder out, and then the brass would be still in the cylinder, and there was a little punch under the barrel, and you just like as if it were like a pencil, like stick it in there and just kind of push the cartridges out. Again, not really for reloading in combat. It was, you'd use it, and then after the fight, you'd pull out a knife. This is still the era of like Bowie knives and stuff, to where you'd carry a gun and a large knife, and when your gun was empty, you'd pull out the knife. That was very much pre-1870s style fighting. It's still kind of into the 1870s or 80s. I'll get to how this one works in a minute, because this one is much more advanced. So the first one is called the #1, or the Model 1. Smith & Wesson revolvers all have model and then a number. The first one is, of course, the Model 1. Makes sense. It is a 7-shot 22, and it is a small frame. It can easily fit in the pocket. Like a coat pocket or something. It's pretty small. I've held a couple in real life. They're very small. Like the grip is only big enough to get like 2 fingers on, like your middle and like ring finger. Like your pinky goes all under the bottom. A slightly bigger gun. Actually, it's getting kind of dark in game, so let's set up camp. Also, I'm hungry, so let's eat some beans. But yeah, so the #1 is, like I said, very tiny. The next gun is the #2, which is a 5-shot 32 on a bigger frame. And this is still small in modern gun parlance. Like, it is still a smaller gun when we imagine it today for revolver size. But it's bigger enough that it isn't really it's not a gun you would fit in the pocket, It's very much a gun that you need to carry out a holster or something, like on your hip. But then we have the weirdest named one. So a 32 is obviously stronger than a 22. I said it was a 5-shot, it's a 6-shot 32. Now, the 32 is obviously stronger than a 22. So, there's a small kind of gap here, which is we now have a pocket 7-shot 22 and a hip 6-shot 32. So Smith & Wesson realized they can make one in the middle that is a 5-shot pocket 32. So this is now their third model. The first one is called the Model 1. The second is the Model 2. Their third one is called the Model 1.5, because it is the frame of the 1 with the cartridge of the 2. So that is how they named that, which is the weirdest thing to me. Smith & Wesson's always had kind of both very simple naming conventions that then get very out of hand very, very quickly. Like, by the 90s, Smith & Wesson has a lot of, like, semi-automatic pistols, where they'll have, like, the Smith & Wesson 1076, and each one of those numbers is telling you something, and and then you hear like the Smith and Wesson 4527 or like the 4525, and like you'll hear that, and you'll know based on that number what is different about those two guns. It's very weird and very complicated. But like I said, that's the 1990s. This is the 1890s. Back where now a couple of new patents get invented. It turns out there's a guy who comes up with an idea. Instead of pulling the cylinder out, well, here, I can show you here. A guy comes up with an idea where he realizes that the camming action of pulling... Well, it's actually two different patents get invented right after the Civil War, and they both are put into this gun. It'll be kind of fast, but you can see it right... Yeah, it's like when this gets... yeah, see that cartridge pop out there? That. Yeah, so this now opens from the top. You break it open with the barrel away from you instead of towards you, and one guy invented that. So the gun was going to originally open up, you pull the cylinder out, you pop it up, you close it, and all that. But then a different guy came up with a separate patent that was when you open it, the cylinder has a little, what is called a star extractor. All revolvers have this these days because of this patent, which is, when you reload a revolver in like any game or whatever, you open up the cylinder and you hit the little like rod, and all the cases come popping out. That is from originally this gun. To where this gun, though, rather than a rod, the rod is set up to a gear that is under the barrel. So when you open up the barrel, at the same time, it is pressing against a gear on the bottom of the rod that kicks back that extractor, causing all those spent cases to get kicked out. Now, there is something in the game, and this is made about 1870, and released is called the Smith & Wesson No. 3, right? Because it is now the third frame size. Now, there is an issue, not really an issue, but something in the game that, well, you can see how you reload this. You kind of just open it down, and the cartridges kind of fall to the side. I do not have a number 3, but I do have a couple of derivatives that use the same action in 32 from a few decades later, once the patents run out made by other companies. Now, an issue with these guns is you have to open them upside down. Because the problem is when you open these by just kind of pulling the barrel forward, gravity is fighting against you. It ejects the cartridges up, and then they fall back down. And there's always a very good chance that they could be pressed up, tipped to the side, but not fully get the case out of the cylinder, and the case will actually fall back into the cylinder under the extractor, and then the extractor will close back down on top of the back of the case, forcing it into the cylinder, and you can't close the gun, and you have to kind of open the gun as much as possible while pulling back the extractor with your hand, and then stick something into the cylinder and tap the bullet out. So this is an actual issue that could happen with any top break revolver like this. So you're really supposed to open these upside down, even though it's much less cool to do that. This kind of action, this is probably, of all the single action revolvers of the original number 3. It's called the number 3 American. And it's basically what you see here in the game, only the latch on the cylinder is a little different. See the latch in front of the hammer? The original latch was more like a little bar that you kind of had to pinch with your fingers. So you'd fire your last shot with the gun in your right hand. You would then pinch it with your finger from your left hand, pull it up, and then press the barrel down. This is fine for most people doing most things, right? And now this gun is chambered in what is called 44 American. Now this gets into a weird thing with lubricating cartridges, because at this time, black powder leaves a lot of residue, and it leaves a lot of residue in the barrel. And the more you shoot, the dirtier the barrel gets, the less accurate your gun gets. But if you lubricate the barrel, then it's less dirty. So what if you had bullets that had lubrication on them that cleaned the barrel while you shot it? That's kind of a thing from the 1860s, 1850s, 1860s. So the original, what is called the number 3 American, had this lubrication on the outside. But about a year or two later, a new cartridge gets invented called the 44 Russian. Called so because the Russian military immediately adopted hundreds of thousands of these guns, these Smith & Wessons, chambered in this cartridge, and it became the de facto cartridge for this kind of gun. Now, what the 44 Russian did was it made the back of the bullet have grooves in it that had the lubrication in the grooves so that it could then sit inside the case. So you didn't have to worry about the fact that the outside of your gun had sticky lubrication on it. The outside of your bullet had sticky lubrication on it. It was all contained in the cartridge. And that style of lubrication is kind of the way that it went. That was kind of the perfected way to lubricate a bullet for the next 30 years until you no longer had to lubricate a bullet because the smokeless powder. Now, the way of all of these number 3s, if you actually look at the numbers, by the year from 1870 to 1900, there were more number 3s than there were single action armies. But the single action army was more popular in the American West because these number 3s, about half of them were sold to foreign military contracts. Just off the top of my head, Russia, as I stated, bought a large majority of them. Of all of I believe there were about 500,000 of these made. Of those, about 100,000 of them were bought by Russia. Egypt bought a decent amount of them. The Ottoman Empire bought some. Japan bought about 2,000. There's a very, very fancy one that has that was given to some Japanese military advisor in the mid 1880s that has very fancy inlaid sakura grips. That's very pretty looking. It is grip panels that have inlaid sakura trees painted on them and stuff. But back to this specific model. You will see this gun referred to as the Schofield. Even though it looks like it should be said Schofield, it's pronounced Schofield as if it was a K there. Now, what the Schofield/Schofield did was there's a guy named Major George Schofield, and he was a cavalry major. And what I mentioned about the thing where you had to pinch the top of the gun and open it like that, his thing was if you're riding a horse and you're in a gunfight, your one hand is on the gun, your other hand is either holding the reins to the horse so you can control the horse, or holding a sword. Because remember, this is still in the era of, you're doing a cavalry charge against a band of Native Americans. You have your gun in your one hand. You have your gun in your left hand. Generally, the way you would do it is you would grab the reins with your left hand, and then grab your gun also in your left hand. So you're holding the leather strap wrapped around your palm, and then you're holding the gun in your hand, and then in your right hand is your sword. Now, the pinching it takes time to do. Schofield realized you can make a latch that you control with your thumb. So you pull it with your thumb and then hit the barrel on your thigh, and it will kick all the cartridges out. So you spend more time with your sword in your hand before you have to put it away to put the bullets in. It doesn't sound like that much time, but that can make a little bit of a difference. So the pattern Also, I do not know why exactly, but this is not in any of the. This is not in 44 American or 44 Russian. This is in a proprietary cartridge called 45 Schofield. That is basically 45 Colt, but shortened, but with a wider rim because the rim needs to catch that star extractor. But the U.S. cavalry buys a few thousand of these, right? And they're pretty good. They're a really good gun for your cavalry. The problem is, remember how I said, so like seconds ago, so now the cavalry in the mid 1870s has two guns. They have the 45 Colt, Single Action Army, and they have the 45 Schofield, Smith & Wesson Model 3. A problem comes up. Military logistics. I really, really, really adore military logistics from a problem-solving perspective, because things happen that you would never think of. When you have two cartridges that are both 45, you think, okay, that's easy. Now we only need to apply 45 cleaning brushes, maybe we can even use the same lead molds. So we can just, it's easier to supply lead molds to everyone, so you just make the same 45 bullet, you just put it in different cases. Problem comes up. They start shipping okay, Company B needs more 45 ammo. Oh, well, I guess, here I am at my military depot. I write a letter, Company B needs more 45 ammo. You send off a shipment of 45, Company B gets their 45 ammo. For their Schofields, they open it up, it's all 45 Colt, made for single action armies. They try to put it in, it fits, but they're a little too long. So even though they fit in the chamber, you can't close the gun. Meanwhile, so they don't work at all. Meanwhile, Company A also needs 45 ammo. They get a shipment of 45 Schofield by accident. It fits in the chamber, and it closes and can fire, but the rims are too wide, so they don't fit together correctly in the cylinder, so you have to skip a chamber. So you make kind of like a Triforce symbol inside inside the cylinder of if you have a Schofield and you get Colt ammo, you're done. You can't do anything about it. Like, the gun just won't work. If you have a Colt and you get Schofield ammo, your 6-shot revolver now becomes a 3-shot revolver where you have to cock the hammer twice in between each shot. But look, it's better than what the Schofield guys have. So once they figure this out, the U.S. government is like, okay, no, never mind. We don't want the Schofield then. Like, it was supposed to be like, okay, we'll have about 75% Colts, 25% Schofields. They get rid of the Schofields because they're like, we don't want these. And they're going to cause that much of a problem. So they end up surplusing them off and selling them to the civilian market. And this is actually an example of what a civilian market one potentially could look like. I have actually seen one of these IRL. About 1,000 of them were purchased by were purchased by a surplus company, right? Who cut the barrel down to 5 inches, put on plastic grips, and then nickel plated the guns, to make them more resistant to weather and rough conditions. And a lot of stagecoach companies bought these. There is actually one of these, one of these actual historical models, at a bizarre gun shop that's just in the middle of nowhere in New Jersey. I walked into one day and was like, "Is that one of the surplus Schofields?" And he was like, "Yeah, it is." And I got to hold it and look at it. It was very cool. This specific configuration is possibly the best gun you could have if you were a gunfighter in the Old West looking for a single-action revolver. A nickel-plated Schofield like this is kind of perfect. With the shortened barrel. It's handy. It is easy to keep in check, and it's not the strongest, but it is strong. And It's got all of the speed of the reload that is much better than the single action army, all that stuff. And in the game, I think these are the best handguns in the game. These are my favorite. Well, the best revolvers. In my first playthrough, I played through these completely, using just Schofields. I really love using them. The thing is, though, is these are a little too strong. Also, one little more historical thing on them. That latch that was paid to Colonel Schofield, Major Schofield, Smith & Wesson didn't want to continue paying him the patent rights, so they just got rid of it and went back to the old latch, which made the Smith & Wesson new model. So the Schofield, even though the Schofield is the most famous of the number 3s, they only made about 5,000 of them, of the, 500,000 Model 3s that they made. Most of the Model 3s are not in the Schofield pattern. They look like this, just with slightly different parts. And then sadly, Major Schofield would then get, his wife would file for divorce, and he would be so distraught he would kill himself with a Schofield revolver. The only known case where someone has killed themselves with a gun that is named after them. But anyway, to the tier list. We're going to go for the Schofield. We're also going to put it in an A. It's pretty much there for the most part, but the balance is off. There's just something off about the balance that isn't really perfect. So, a moment ago, I made a clarification when I was talking, right? I said it would be the best gun for a gunfighter of that era. Let's see, do I have these visually set up differently for any reason? A bit, yeah. So I said it would be the best gun for a gunfighter of that era. That is kind of true, but then I went back and be like, when in terms of single actions. We think of single actions because they were the most popular at the time. Why that is over double actions. So, you've noticed so far, every time I've been, showing these guns, I have to cock the hammer in between each shot. And you physically have to do that in the game. You click to shoot, and then you have to click again to cock the hammer. Now, the character will cock the hammer when I aim for the first time, but you'll see here, you don't need to do that in subsequent shots. That is because this is a double action. Now, double actions have been around for a very long time. Pretty much immediately when single action revolvers started, double action revolvers started. But America really kind of likes single action revolvers, and there is a lot of historical back and forth as to why. Europe really liked double action. There was a lot of countries in Europe that just never adopted a single action revolver. France never did. France went straight from muskets, like single shot musket pistols, to double action revolvers. Italy did too. I believe so did Belgium and Norway. There are a few countries that adopted single actions. The ones I mentioned before, like America, America did, Ottoman Empire, Egypt, Japan, Germany, countries like that. England never did. England bought some Colts for the Crimean War, but most England immediately made domestic double action revolvers. So, kind of a thing with this is that the American revolver market was much more frontier focused. It's like you need a revolver to, because your horse broke its ankle and you maybe need to shoot your horse. Or you're in a cavalry regiment that is out in, you're out in the middle of nowhere in Arizona. If a part breaks on your revolver, that's not good. You are days away from a base. So, It's a kind of a thing with that. Compared to Europe, where you're not really in a frontier, or the English market, to where most of that, getting too idle there, most of that in England is the market is for like the streets of London and stuff. So you want a gun you can fire quickly. So Colt and Smith and Wesson both did make double action revolvers by the late 1870s, early 1880s that were probably the better. There is Smith and Wesson by about 1882 or 3 made what is it has bizarrely no official name. People call it different things, but it is basically a double action version of the Model 3 we just saw, and it's basically just the same gun, but you can pull the trigger without having to cock the hammer. That gun is essentially what would be the best gun possible if you were an American in the mid 1880s and you needed a gun for fighting people that was a pistol. The double action top rate Smith and Wesson is the best available. But let's get to the late 1880s. Colt also had a double action that was basically a double action version of their single action. So, like the top half was the same. You had to eject the cartridges one by one, all that stuff. By the late 1880s, 1889, Colt comes out with this, which is the new model Navy. Now, the old model Navy is an old cap and ball revolver. This is the new model Navy. And this is, like, when you think of a revolver, this is what a revolver looks like to this day. Not exactly in every shape, in every form, but the general shape of what we think of as a modern revolver is from Colt in 1889. Now, the internal lockwork was not invented by Colt. Like the internal pieces that like cause the mechanism inside that causes the pulling of the trigger to cock the hammer and turn the cylinder was actually made by a Belgian man named Fonyu back in the early 1860s. And his kind of mechanism is kind of the father of most modern revolvers, especially Colt systems. Smith & Wesson systems are a little different. But this gun, made in the late 1880s, but then really more kind of made throughout the 1890s, is the set of what we consider to be a revolver today. Swing out cylinder, 6-shot, 38 caliber, 4-inch barrel. This is just what we consider normal. This is not the 38 special, we know. This is a 38 long Colt. 38 special is the special version of this. Oh, run back real quick to 44 Russian. 44 special is the special version of 44 Russian, and then 44 Magnum is the Magnum version of 44 special. So 44 Russian is the grandfather to 44 Magnum. It is just like 44 Magnum lengthened to twice. But yeah, this kind of pattern is the pattern of the revolver that would dominate America in the 20th century. This would lead a whole family of Colt revolvers in different frame sizes. Smith & Wesson would copy this exact same layout, but with their own kind of accoutrements, and that would create their entire family. And any revolver from the 20th century that you can think of that is from America can trace its lineage to this specific layout of revolver. It is, like I said, double action. You come out and you eject it, you reload it, fine. The game presents this perfectly. This is exactly how this should work. This is exactly how it is done. Like I said, your character cocks the hammer during the first shot. You don't need to do that. There's no reason to do that, but it doesn't like take points away or anything. Like it's like you could do that if you wanted to for some reason. Now, performance-wise in the game, it is weak, but that is accurate to real life. Famously, 38 Colt was used in the Philippines insurrection, where a lot of complaints from U.S. troops that Philippine guerrillas would charge them with machetes, and they would try to shoot them with their 38 revolvers, and it wouldn't instantly kill them. It would shoot them, they would then get stabbed with a machete, and then the guy would die. This led to a disillusion in the 38 caliber by the U.S. military, and it was then decided that in about 1905 that the U.S. needs to stick to 45, which is where the 1911 comes from, and 45 ACP and all that. All of that is from this gun. We don't really see it much as a cowboy gun because it is from the later days of the cowboy era, but it very much does have prominence. It is there is a famous gunfight, the death of a man named Soapy Smith up in the Yukon Territory in Alaska during the late 1890s in a gold rush. And he died in that gunfight, and he was carrying one of these. So it does have historical prominence of being a gun of the cowboy outlaw era, as well as, like I said, being kind of the grandfather of 20th century revolver layout. And the game kind of nails all this perfectly. So, with that in mind, we're going for the double action. We're going S tier. We got our first S tier here, folks. And that's all the revolvers. So, as you can see, the game, pretty good job with the revolvers. Pretty perfect, I'd say. Like they could use a little rebalancing, but that's really the only issue, is slight balancing issues with the revolvers. Okay, so now we're going to the semi-auto. The pistols, which are called pistols to differentiate from revolvers. And we are going, I did not mean to get on my horse, but we are going with actually the oldest gun in the game and the weirdest gun in the game. This is a volcanic pistol. These are very weird and have a very, very strange history. These are from the early to mid 1850s, right? And these are actually made by a kind of a forerunner of Smith & Wesson. This gun is a weird kind of like, when you think of American guns of the 1800s, Colt kind of started a little before these guys, but everyone except for Colt is involved with this gun. Winchester is involved. Henry is involved. Smith & Wesson is involved. This is basically a collaboration between Smith & Wesson and Henry before either of those guys started their own companies. What this is, it is the Henry toggle link action that would dominate Winchesters, but in a pistol size. They also did make volcanic rifles. But the weird thing about these guns is that these are before cartridges were a thing. So this uses what is called rocket ball ammunition. Now, what rocket ball is a bullet that has a very long back. And the back of the bullet is hollowed out and then filled with gunpowder. And then there was a cap put on the back of that bullet, right? But it's like a cap that kind of burns itself out. So this is technically caseless. Caseless ammunition is something that has been chased for a while, because you don't have to worry about ejection, any of that, but we've never really settled on a proper caseless ammunition. Though technically caseless ammunition, as you can see, existed before cartridge ammunition. So, how this works in the game, right, is you fire, and then you kind of flick the gun like this. That's not really how it would be done in real life. This is more how it would be done in real life. You would kind of hold it with your left hand, kind of like a mini rifle, you know? And then when you were done, you would load from the front like that with the rocket ball. Now, you can see here, it is ejected cases. That's not accurate. It shouldn't be doing that. The whole point of the volcanic is that it existed before cases. Now, there's a little tab under the barrel there. That also should not be where that is. That tab is the tab for the magazine spring that is pushing the cartridges back into the elevator. So that should actually be moving down the barrel as cartridges are loaded into the chamber. Visually, yeah, this is what a volcanic looks like. So no problem there. Historically, volcanics existed at the time, yes. But performance-wise, for some reason, there are a few video games where this appears. Red Dead, Call of Juarez, all that stuff. I guess they get kind of caught up in the name of the volcanic, the rocket ball. Like, they're like, oh, this must be amazing, right? These guns are incredibly, incredibly weak. Like IRL. Like, there is barely any gunpowder backing these up. You probably could not kill someone with one of these unless you hit them in, like, the forehead or, like, directly in the heart. And even if you hit them in the heart, there is actually legitimately a good chance you might not be able to break through their breastplate. Like, they're, like, the bone. They're very not good from power-wise. So they were kind of a failure. There weren't many of them made. Historical provenance, there is one weird case in, like, the late 1850s where there was like an asylum in New York that, like, a bunch of people got angry that it was there, like, in the middle of the city, so they wanted to burn it down. So they were like, the asylum needed guards to stop mobs from burning down the asylum, and they were like, well, this is the closest thing to repeating firepower we have in the mid-1850s, so they got a couple of these. But aside from that, these guns aren't good, but what they are for, where they are important historically, is that this is both the grandfather of Smith & Wesson as a company and Winchesters as a rifle pattern. You can see where a Winchester comes from when you look at this. Like, it's like when you look at, like, like a T-Rex, and you can see where a chicken is in that, It's like Winchester rifles evolved out of this, and the Smith & Wesson company evolved out of this. So it's weird. But, so, like I said, the model's good. It has some issues, though. And, but the performance is just really not great from how it is historically. So I think I'm going to go with C here for this. Just because it really shouldn't even be in the game. There's anybody by the 1890s, they weren't making ammo for this anymore by this time. All of these would have just been weird, like, collector's items at this era. No one would actually be using one of these in the 1890s. Okay. Now, it's getting dark, so back to the camp. Take a little nap. Isn't this amazing? What a game. You can go up here in the snow, you can set up a little camp, take a little nap in a tent. This is, what else could you want? You're shooting cowboy guns in the snow. This is all you need. Alright. So, next, we've got, here we go. Yeah, the game is so good for, like, just, like, doing whatever. It's amazing. So this is a very weird gun. Now this is called a Beauchart. I probably am mispronouncing that, as it is a German gentleman that invented this. And these are from the 1893, and this is the first successful semi-automatic pistol. Successful in quotes. Uh, there were a couple of pistols, mostly from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, uh, that were semi-automatic pistols in the few years before this, but they weren't sold commercially. Like maybe like 15 of them were made. About 3,000 of these were made. So these are, commercially, you could have bought one of these. Now, they're interesting in that they are basically a prototype of the Luger. What's funny, they actually use the same like locking system that the Winchester does. It's just you didn't see it on the Winchester because it's internal. And actually, the same locking system you saw on the Volcanic a second ago, which is called the toggle link. Let me see if I could shoot it and you can see the toggle link here. Uh, yeah, see that kick up? Uh, so the way that these work, this gun is in Red Dead 1, yes. The way that these work is, so like stick your arm out straight, right? Like you're at full extent of a push-up. Or actually, if you were doing a push-up, like, and you pushed all the way up, and then someone sat on your back, you could maybe hold that for a little bit, right? If you were doing a push-up and you stopped halfway down, and then someone sat on your back, you couldn't hold that, like, as much, because, your elbow is bent. That is how these work. Uh, when the toggle is at its when it's in battery, like when it's chambered, the toggle is straight, like a straight arm. And this causes the gunpowder of the bullet pushes back on this, and the entire upper part of the gun moves with the bullet, but the chamber is sealed, so pressure is building up, allowing more power to build in the barrel to propel the bullet out. And this keeps straight until you can see that little bit of a slope at the back of the gun on the top. The elbow hits this, which causes it to bend a little, and when it bends a little, the pressure then racks the entire thing back, and then there's a big spring on like that lump in the back. That's just a big spring housing that then slams it back forward. It's insane that like someone even imagined that this could work, but it does. Now, this works pretty perfectly in the game. Historically, it feels like this shouldn't be here, but there is weirdly a picture of, you could put a stock on these. A lot of these early pistols you could put stocks on to make them into like almost like semi-auto submachine guns. There's weirdly a picture of like a Native American man in like 1902 with one of these with a stock on it. Where did he get that? I have no idea. But so yeah, you could have gotten one of these if you were like a cowboy in the American West at this period. Performance-wise, it's exactly how it should be. This is what it should look like. This is how it should function. The only issue, you can see it better in this image here. See how that grip is kind of angled? This is not what a Beauchart grip looks like. Beauchart grips they're vertical. It's like an Uzi. Like it is perpendicular to the barrel. There is no angled curve to the grip. The reason why in this game it has a grip angle like that is because all of the guns need to have a similar grip angle so that they can swap out in cutscenes, and you don't have Arthur's hand changing in between cutscenes. Uh, if Arthur's hand is in the same place in every cutscene, then you can put every single different gun in his hand, so that your gun that you're carrying can appear in the cutscene. And that works for every gun in the game except the Bowshart, because the Bowshart is supposed to have a vertical magazine and a vertical grip, but they kind of had to change it for this. And that really takes away the kind of iconic look of the Bowshart. Now, interestingly, Germany would look at the Bowshart for military adoption, as would Switzerland. And they would be like, it's good, but it could be a little bit better. And Hugo Bowshart was like, no, it can't. This is literally the best a gun could ever be. Guns could never get any better than this. His assistant, Georg Luger, took some time to the side to make it better, and then presented this to the Swiss army, and was like, what about this? And they much preferred it. It gave it the grip angle that the Bowshart has in the game, so a more ergonomic grip angle. And that spring on the back that caused that huge, lump, he was able to make parallel to the bottom of the slide, getting rid of the lump, but still using the same action and all that stuff. And that is where the Luger comes from. The Luger is basically just like an improved Bowshart. It is the Bowshart with the stubbornness of Hugo Bowshart taken out of it. But that would not come until about 1900. So not really entirely accurate for this period. So, as you can see, this game, performance is pretty good. Historical provenance, it could have existed. But model is a little weird. So, I'm going to come here with it. It's not, that's egregious enough of a weird grip angle that I'm gonna fault it pretty decently, because Bowshart should not look like that. The Bowshart has it's got a very specific vertical magazine well, and that is part of what makes the Bowshart the Bowshart. Anyway, coming back, we've now got the most famous semi-automatic pistol of the 1890s, the C96 Mauser. This is the most successful of the 1890s semi-autos, though would not be it would be surpassed pretty quickly. Even though they are only 4 years apart, if you compare a C96 to a Luger feels like it is decades ahead in terms of technology. You think of you look at this and how alien this looks. It's so alien that it's in Star Wars, how different this looks from a modern pistol. And then look at, say, a 1911, and how much a 1911 looks like a modern pistol, and then realize that they are only 15 years apart. These were very common in the first half of the 20th century. A lot of people like these. They are 10-shot, chambered in their own cartridge, 7.63 by 25 Mauser. And they use a kind of similar action to the Bowshart in the way that the entire slide moves back to unlock, but rather than the toggle link, it has its own linking action on the inside to unlock the chamber. They have nicknames. In English, they are called the broom handle, because the handle of the gun looks like the handle of a broom. In China, they are called the box cannon, because when you bought them, they would most times come with a wooden holster that you could also use as a shoulder stock, famously. So you would carry the gun around in that, and that configuration was very, very, very popular in China. China bought a lot of these. China made a lot of copies of these. If you look at like warlord era China, so like if you look at like 1920s China or World War II China, this gun is everywhere. This is like their go-to pistol. Technically, no military would actually adopt this as the no military would adopt this as uh the like standard issue. Oh yeah, the sideways shooting thing is a weird thing with these. To where in the 1930s, these would get updates to make them full auto and magazine fed. And yeah, some people would turn these sideways and fire them like that to control the recoil better. But no military adopted these as their standard issue sidearm. But a lot of militaries bought these as backup sidearms. Like if they couldn't get enough of their standard issue, they would just buy a bunch of these to give to secondary guys. Austria bought a bunch. Germany bought a bunch. Germany's would actually be re-chambered to 9mm, so they use the same bullet as the Luger and the P38. And there's a big red 9 painted on the grip of those, so you know that it is a 9mm. And as such, they are called the C96 Red 9s. Winston Churchill carried one of these in the Boer War. These were very, very popular in the the early half of the 20th century, especially in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. Not so much in America, but they were around in America. In South America, they showed up. Chile bought a couple for their military. I believe Argentina bought some for their military. A lot show up in Brazil. They are all over the world as just like they're nobody's first choice, but pretty much everybody's second choice when it came to military guns of the early 1900s. Now, in game, its performance is pretty good. These are actually incredibly powerful. In real life, that cartridge is very fast. The 7.63 by 25. It is very, very fast and has a decent weight bullet, so it's actually a very powerful gun. Its performance in the game reflects that. This is the strongest pistol in the game, as it should be. It's very reminiscent of what it like performance-wise. Very good as to how the gun works in real life. Reload right there, perfect. As you can see, you reload it with stripper clips, which is weird, but not so weird when you think this is the 1890s. We didn't really know how semi-automatic pistols work yet. In the 1930s, there would be a detachable magazine version of these. Those came kind of much too late. It was like they should have set up the detachable magazine version of these much, much earlier on. Quick configuration. 6-inch barrel. Like I said, 10-round magazine. There's a version of these called the Bolo, short for Bolshevik, because during right after the Russian Civil War, or in the latter half of it, a lot of Soviets bought these. But they bought a more civilian commercial version that is slightly smaller. The grip is a little bit smaller. It's not that big broom handle grip. It's more of a modern ergonomic grip, and the barrel is shortened to about 4 inches, so it's easier to carry. And those normally didn't have the stocks. Those normally came in leather holsters. But that smaller pattern is called a Bolo, and I really like those because they're more associated with like Soviets. I just think they're cool as just like a more carryable C96. Like a C96 you would carry in the city versus this one which you would bring to like the wars. Like I said, in-game performance really good. There's just a few issues with it, as you can see, right there. The hammer's down. That's not how this works. You need to fire this gun with the hammer cocked. Remember with the actually here, let me. Oh, actually no, I had one on me. So remember the double action hammer down, but then you aim and you cock it. even though you don't need to do that. You can just fire it like this. You don't need to cock it for the first shot. The C96, you very much do need to cock it for the first shot. Or take the safety off. This game just acts like you don't. Like, yeah. Like, how'd that happen? That shouldn't be that. That's not how that works. So that's kind of an issue with it. Also, let me just... Okay, that there. You see, how this works is, how loading these works. You pull the slide back, you put the stripper clip in, the stripper clip keeps the bolt from sliding forward, you press the rounds in, you pull the stripper clip out, the bolt racks forward and chambers around. All well and good. Now the problem, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I've just fired 5 rounds, meaning there are 5 rounds in the magazine. Let me reload this, and I just shoved 10 rounds in the magazine. You kind of can't top these off. Like, a lot of video games will have you rack back the slide, and then you feed, like, 1 by 1 bullets. Like, okay, I have 5 in. I pull the slide back. 1, 2, 3, like with your thumb. That also doesn't work, because the way that the slide needs to lock back is it needs the stripper clip in there. So you really can only load these guns by loading 10 at a time. And then you empty the gun and then put 10 more in. So that reload is a little weird in the game. How, I don't even know how you would do it. It just kind of ignores the ammo in here. There's an Austrian pistol that uses the same system, but it has a button on the side that when you press the button, all the ammo in the gun goes shooting out the top. Like, it just ejects out the top. It just goes flying everywhere. And that is for, I only have 2 bullets left in the gun. I need to reload. Let me just eject the 2 bullets, and then you put a full magazine in it. That's kind of where stripper clip pistols aren't a thing anymore, because that weird back and forth of that. But going with that, all that, coming to the tier list with it, we're gonna bring it to an A. As it's mostly good, it just has those 2 weird little systems, like little issues with the reload and the hammer. Now this next gun is weird, that it is in the game. Which one of these do I grab? Let me see that one. No, not that. I have them, I have one customized to be historical and the one customized for in-game performance. Okay, yeah, the historical one. So, this is a weird gun in that it is, it's a PC exclusive for some reason. This is only in the PC version of the game. And this is an FN 1899/1900. And these are the first pistol with a slide. They're designed by John Browning, who designed pretty much like every major American gun of the turn of the 19th century. Yes, it is the first pistol to have this modern layout. Like I said, these are 125 years old at this point, but they're the first pistol to really be shaped like a pistol, which if you think about it, the first semi-automatic pistol, 1893, this is 1899. John Browning, in 6 years, set up the form factor for the first modern pistol. In, like, they're 32. This is the first gun to be chambered in 32 ACP, which would dominate the first half of the 20th century. Like I said, they actually have a slide, so you can see it very thin. These are meant to be carried in a pocket. Like, these are pocket pistols. Let's see. You can see the slide moving there, and then when we reload, you see you rack the slide like a modern pistol. Yeah, modern pistols were pretty much immediately invented. There were other designs that were attempted in the next, 20 years. But through kind of evolution and Darwinism, whatever, this pattern kind of came out on top. Uh, these sold like hotcakes in Europe. Uh, because you can see how thin it is, how small these are. You can easily fit this in a coat pocket. And so these were carried around in, by just like pretty much everyone in early 20th century Europe. It made the 32 the ubiquitous cartridge of that era. You can't really see it, but weirdly, so you see the front of the gun, how normally how guns work of this type. The barrel is on the top, and then you can see under the barrel on the front of the gun. That's where the recoil spring would be. That's not the case on this. It's the other way around. That tube on the top of the gun, that's not the barrel. That's the recoil spring. The barrel is the tube under that. Browning's next design, the 1900 sporting model, which is slightly different and a much even more modern looking feel. That would have the more traditional layout we're familiar with today. China also loves these. China bought a bunch of these, and they made a bunch of bootleg ones. If you were a Chinese officer in the warlord period, you would have a C96 on your hip, and then you'd have one of these in your pocket. That was like the go-to. There were this same system and action, which is just called straight blowback, to where, how I talked about the other guns, where I said, okay, here is how it works, if it has to hold the pressure of the cartridge, all that stuff. The straight blowback is low power cartridges that it is just held in place by the force of the spring and the weight of the slide. That system is still in use today with you can still buy today a 32 ACP that is held in with a spring and a slide just like this pistol is. This is the grandfather of all semi-automatic pistols of the 20th and 21st century. But in game, it's a little too strong for a 32 ACP. Here, listen to that. Ugh. That is a big, bang. 32 is pretty weak. It's not super weak, but it's a pocket pistol. 32 is not for fighting guns. A couple of militaries did, in World War I and World War II, have frontline military 32 pistols. Italy did. France did. France's main pistol in World War II was a 32. Yugoslavia did for a while. Belgium did. But not many. Not many countries had frontline 32s. Most by World War II did not. Czechoslovakia did for the 30s, but right before World War II they swapped out. And they got a slightly better cartridge. The only issue with the game, again, the grip angle on this is slightly wrong. Not as egregious as the Boschart. It's a little bit too canted back, again, to fit that animation. I'm not going to slight it for that, because it's close enough. This is what it should look like. The problem is, it's super thin. It is, because it has, no mechanism. It's just supposed to fit, it's just, the entire thing is just blowback. And you can see just the tiny little safety on the left side. And yeah, like I said, they're supposed to fit in a coat pocket. Now, the stats are a little wrong. It has 8 rounds in the magazine. It should have 6. But aside from that, it's pretty good. So, coming over to the tier list, we'll put it on an A. So this is where the handguns all kind of check out. As you can see, they got the revolvers really well. They got 2 of the semi-autos pretty good, and then 2 of the pistols not so great. But let's come back, and now we're going to do the repeaters. So, put away pistols. Now, you remember that old, what's it called? Let's go into third person for this for a second. So you can see, this is an 1860 Henry. You remember that volcanic that I was showing you? This is what the volcanic turned into. Because once cartridges became a thing, the volcanic immediately was like, okay, well, we'll just redo that, but with cartridges now. And that was much more successful. These are 1860. These were used throughout the Civil War, by, not adopted by much U.S. military, but mostly by, like, militias, where they were run by individuals and benefactors who would purchase these for the troops. Uh, there are a few famous battles in the Civil War of, like, Confederates with muskets, like, going up against Henrys and just getting, like, destroyed. Uh, it is really remarkable. Like I said, this is 1860. So 1859, the most common gun is a musket, you know? And then overnight, this becomes like possible. Like, this is really insane for the technological evolution of what happened right before the Civil War. There is actually that same gun shop that I mentioned earlier that has the Schofield, in New Jersey, has one of these that was carried, and it has like the stamps and stuff, by a Maryland militia that was tasked with guarding the White House during the Civil War. And yeah, this is a perfect gun to do that with. Now, these are chambered in what is called 44 Henry rimfire, which is a little 44 caliber, so it's decent. It's 44 caliber backed by about 28 grains of black powder, coming out of a rifle. So it's a pretty prominent. It's not like rifle. It's about the strength of like getting shot by like a single submachine gun bullet. You could call lever actions like this the submachine guns of their day, as they use like pistol caliber ammunition. So how the Henry works is it's like the rocket ball. You have to pull that tab to the front, lock it, all that kind of stuff, feed down, and then other than that, it's pretty normal. Kind of set the stage of what a lever action is expected to be. Now, in the game, it's pretty good. The barrel is a little bit short. This has about a 20-inch barrel. They should have 24-inch barrels. And they're in the game, it's too strong. I'll talk about that when I get to the next gun. But yeah, as you can see, it's pretty good. The reload is exactly how it should be. This gun was in Red Dead 1, and the reload was just completely incorrect. You loaded it from the back in Red Dead 1. It was really weird. But yeah, it's pretty good. It has the bright brass frame as it should, all of that. But not much to cover on it. Like I said, they were popular in well, historically they still would have been around in the 1890s. But not new. They would have been from like you found one used, you know, your dad had one and you inherited it. It's very much an 1860s firearm that would have still been around in the 1870s, 80s, and 90s. But not much to say about it. They got pretty good, but not perfect. So we're going to come to the tier list pretty quick on this one, because most of the history on it we covered with the volcanic and how that was working stuff. So I think with this, I think I'm going to go with a B on it, because it has some balance issues, and it's too short. It should be longer. Now, here's where we get into a weird one that's kind of presented in the game. This, where is it? Here it is. Let's see. Is it this one? Or no, it might be the other one that I have. Yeah. So this. Oh yeah. So also naming wise, they call that the Litchfield for some reason. In real life, it's a Henry. Like I said, some of the companies in the game are fake. Some of them are real. This is called the Carbine Repeater, but in real life, this is a Spencer carbine. Now, the Spencer carbine is also 1860, and it is very weird when we compare it to modern day lever actions. This is again that kind of evolution thing, where both of these were new. Both this and the Henry were new in 1860, but it's just the Henry just overtook it because it's just so much better. It's really the Spencer really is a shame because the Spencer would have been amazing if the Henry did not exist. This is like 10 times better than a musket. And remember, the year before this, the musket was the best thing you had. The problem is, the same year this came out, the Henry also came out, and the Henry is 100 times better than a musket. These have a very weird action to where these are basically a Sharps with a magazine. So the way you shoot these is so on a modern lever action, you lever forward, you lever back. That's that. How you shoot a Spencer is you lever forward, you lever back, and then you cock the hammer. It does not have a bolt that actuates the hammer. You have to do it separately, which really slows it down. Power-wise, these are chambered in a bunch of different cartridges. The main one was 5656. They're they're much more closer to a rifle than they are to a submachine gun. So these are much more powerful than a Henry, but not powerful enough to really replace it as a standard rifle. They're weird. They're a very bizarre kind of like evolutionary dead end. Like Henrys kept evolving, as you will see. These didn't. These came out, they were what they are, and then they stopped. That said, these were very, very, very well used in the Civil War. For sharpshooters, the carbines weren't, but there were 30-inch barrel versions that were made for some regiments that were about as accurate as an oil rifle. So these were really good in the Civil War. The carbine, if you were a Civil War cavalry soldier, this is probably the best rifle you could have of what was standard issue. It is the second most common. The Sharps carbine was the most common, but that was only a single shot. This is a 7-shot. And the cartridge that this is in, the 5656, there is a whole world of Civil War cavalry carbines that are insane. And there's like 15 of them that both the Union and the Confederacy bought. And they're all different. They all use different systems. It's all weird. And it's very fascinating and interesting. But by the end of the war, any of them that could take a cartridge were converted to 5656, and this became the standard cartridge for cavalry units up until about the mid-1870s. A lot of, when you think of Little Bighorn, Custer's men were largely equipped with these. The Native Americans he was up against were largely equipped with Henrys, though. Now, here's a weird thing. You'll see how this reloads in the game. Okay, watch this. Alright. You see that weird tube? That is called a Blakesley tube. How these things reload is you pull a tube out of the stock, you drop 7 rounds into the stock, and then you put the tube back in the stock, right? Easy enough to do on horse. Easier to reload on horse than a Henry, but it's still kind of weird to reload. Not perfect yet. We'll get into a perfect horse reload in a minute. But, not, kind of weird. After the Civil War, A lot of these, what would happen is what you just saw is called a Blakesley tube, which would be issued in Blakesley boxes, which are thin metal tubes that have 7 rounds in them. And the idea is you pull your main tube out, you put it in like a little pouch. You then tip the gun over, so it's now facing the barrel down. You grab one of these tubes out, you stick it into the back of the gun, and then you tip it up, and all the bullets fall out into the back, and then you drop your tube, you pick up your main tube, you put it back in, and so it's basically a speed reloader for Spencers. And they kind of work, they kind of don't, they're weird. Uh, the army would get away from them in like the mid 1870s. They didn't really like them. But these would be surplus a bunch, and these would be very common and easy to buy in the 1890s. Ammo was still made until the 1930s. It was used a lot for deer hunting by people because it's a very lightweight little tight gun that has a powerful, accurate cartridge that can take down a deer. Pretty good. Like I said, it would be the best gun to exist if the Winchester/Henry did not exist. The weird thing in the game is that, remember back when I was talking about the single action army, I'll sleep again, so it can be morning. And I said the weird thing of like, they kind of make the bad guns more common, because if the good guns would be too common, then you kind of get into an issue. Even though, like I said, even though it is better than a musket, the Spencer is like the worst lever action of that era. So because of that, it is the most common lever action in this game. Like almost every like grunt enemy you find carries a Spencer. Anyone that they just need to be like, this guy in the game has a gun, they will give the Spencer, which makes the Spencer far more represented in this game than it actually was in the American West. Not many people, like, if you look up like gunfights of like between like gangs and outlaws and sheriffs and stuff of like the 1880s, 1890s, 1870s, I can't think of one off the top of my head that has a Spencer in it. Uh, if you were expected to fight somebody, you were not buying a Spencer. If you were like a homesteader, like a rancher, and you needed a gun to shoot raccoons, to shoot, to hunt deer, and then maybe, yeah, scare off or fight a cattle rustler. And you couldn't afford a Winchester, but hey, there's a Spencer in the surplus catalog for pretty cheap, that'd be fine for that. But it's not the best. That said, in the game, they did a pretty good job. I get the Blakesley tubes are there for balance. To make it so that it's not completely useless. It's got the fast reload going for it. But yeah, it's close enough. So I think I'll go with a B on it because of its overrepresentation. The model's good. The stats are kind of there. But it is just so overrepresented that I kind of have to go with a B. So, right after the Civil War, big breakthrough in Winchester. This one actually does not have the accurate sights on it. This is the upgraded sights. The sights that were on the Henry are more accurate. What's that guy out there? That ram. So what this is this is kind of a hybrid gun. So, like I said, ignore the sights. Imagine this had the Henry sights on them. I guess I haven't gotten around to putting the actual historical sights on this. This is actually basically what is an 1866 Winchester. Right after the Civil War, the Henry Repeating Arms Company became the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, and they took the Henry and basically made like a pro version of it. So the big issue with the Henry was a reloading method, right? You can't do that on a horse. It's weird. Your hand needs to go near the hot barrel, all that stuff. Well, what the 1866 did was a guy named, I don't know his first name, but his last name was King, creates what is called a loading gate, which if you can see here, well, you can see it from like pretty much the same as the Henry for the most part. But when you get to the reload, there's a little like notch on the side that you just shove the round into. And it's right on the side of the frame. So you just put it right into the back of the tube from the back, kind of like how a modern shotgun works, but it's on the side. And this would completely set in stone the standard lever action pattern that we still have to this day. The 1866 Winchester is the shape and layout of what we consider a modern Winchester. Now, these are also chambered in 44 Henry rimfire, so the same bullet as the 44 Henry. Well, so this is basically the 66 is just a Henry, but better. It is just a Henry with a better reloading system. It also had a brass frame. Mine has a blued frame. I'll explain why in a moment. Now, in the game, the stats are a little. Oh no, you could. Well, the way you'd have to reload them is you'd have to cycle them. Like you just have to keep racking the lever, but not pulling the trigger, and that would just have the rounds go through the action, which technically is dangerous. But yeah, nowadays some guns like the modern Henry Repeating Arms Company, you just pull a plug on the front of the barrel and pour the rounds out without having to recycle through the action. But there are two 1866s. Okay. There is and this will set a pattern for future Winchesters. There is the rifle and the carbine. The rifles have 24-inch barrels. The carbines have 20-inch barrels. Now, the model in this game is the carbine, but it has the ammo capacity as if it were the rifle. This should actually have a 10-shot magazine, not a 14-shot magazine. I think it would also balance this with the Henry in the game a little bit better. If the Henry, because there's not really much use. The Henry has some, like, it's not as accurate and the reload is much longer. It's a little more powerful, and we'll get to that in a second, than this is. But I don't think it's enough to verify, to make its use worthwhile. And you get the Henry much later than you get the Winchester. So it's weird. I don't like how they balance that. This should have 4 less rounds than it actually does. Now, why mine is blued framed is because I didn't want an 1866 Winchester. I wanted an 1873 Winchester, which looks almost exactly like the 1866, only it has a metal blued frame instead of a brass frame. And it also it has little panels on the side, so you can take the panel off and clean the inside instead of having to completely take the gun apart. And it should have a dust cover, a little thing on the top that slides over the action and then slides off when you lever it open, so that mud and rain and stuff doesn't get inside. Those are also now chambered in a new cartridge called the 4440. Now, the 4440 is 44 Henry rimfire, lengthened a bit to put more gunpowder in it, and now in center fire. So it actually has an actual like cap on the back, like a firing pit, like a firing primer that we know of as like a modern bullet. So that is kind of the ultimate evolution of the Henry. The 1866 added the loading gate. The 1873 gave it a modern, more powerful bullet, and gave panels on the side so you can easily clean and access the internals of the gun. And that is also sold in carbine and rifle configuration. Again, in my game, I have it set up as a carbine. And so just with a color of the change of the frame, you can pretend the 66 is a 73, and the 73 is much more common than the 66. Though the 66 was common, You would find both 66s and 73s all throughout the late 1800s. Uh, a lot of revolvers. The 73 would become so common that ammo that it uses, 4440, a lot of revolvers would also end up becoming chambered in 4440. If you were a company like Colt or Smith and Wesson that had your standard, like Colt, of course, chambered in 45 Colt. They also had a model called the Frontier model that is the same gun, chambered in 4440. That way, when you go to your general store, you go to the counter, you say I would like one box of 4440. You buy that, you put it on your cartridge belt or whatever. And now you have your loops on your belt instead of having to be like, okay, here are my right half of my belt is my pistol ammo, my left half of my belt is my rifle ammo. Uh, you just buy it and then you put it on your belt, and now your rifle and your pistol use the same bullet, and you just go about your day. You probably don't need to use your pistol much. You're out there hunting with your rifle, but in the case that you don't have your rifle with you, you don't have to worry about putting your pistol ammo in the belt. It's just already there. It's very easy to do. You just have to buy one box of ammo and share it between both guns, or just buy two boxes of ammo. Rather than have to go, oh, is this my 45? Is this my 44? All that stuff. It's a very common thing that was done. A lot of You'll find a lot of letters from like famous frontiersmen and like sheriffs and stuff who request 4440s. Is a very kind of common thing of that era. That kind of kickstarted the same pattern we have nowadays, where countries will adopt a submachine gun in the same caliber as their handgun, or vice versa. Oh my God, we got Goom in the chat, folks. But when it comes to the 66 Winchester, this is pretty good in the game. Uh, it doesn't do as much damage as the Henry. It should do a little more. Um, it should do either equal or more. Uh, Model wise, pretty perfect. Like I said, I have the wrong sights on it right now, but this is pretty much here. Performance wise, pretty perfect. The only thing is it doesn't have the correct magazine capacity to the carbine. It has the rifle length magazine capacity. So with that, we're going to go with an A. Okay, now this next one is also back to that 4440. A lot of the time, if you were making a revolver that your company was not big enough to really get its own bullet, like Smith and Wesson and Colt had, you would just go to 4440. Remington made some revolvers. They started in their own proprietary 46 Remington cartridge, but immediately they were like, no, we're not going to do that. All Remington 1875s and Remington 1890s are just chambered in 4440 for the most part. A lot of cheap Belgian revolvers that are kind of no name, like they're just made by like cheap gunsmiths and sent over to America. Those are chambered in 4440. It is the 9mm or the 5.56 of its day. It is just the standard. It is just what, unless your gun was a special gun like a single action army uh, or a top-rank Smith & Wesson, 4440 was the go-to for the American West. A 4440 lever action, like a Winchester 73 carbine, and that double-action Smith & Wesson I mentioned earlier, with that revolver chambered in 4440, would be, like, bar none, the best loadout you can have. Like, the most, like, high-speed, low-drag, like, special ops cowboy you could be is a guy with that loadout. Now, this is a weird one. This is an Evans repeater. An Evans is a very weird lever action that has something strange going for it. In that, you see in the stock, how the stock has like a bunch of metal in it? That is because that is the magazine for the gun. It has a helical magazine that is kind of like a conveyor belt. It's very hard to explain, right? Where it's, imagine like a spiral staircase, right? and every time you lever the magazine, uh, every time you lever the rifle, every so imagine you have a bunch of people standing on a staircase, right? And then you lever the rifle, and every time you lever the rifle, everyone goes up one step, right? That is how this works. Because of that, it lets it hold 26 rounds in the magazine. That is legit to real life. Which is crazy for this period. It so and you lever it as fast as a Winchester. It's about as powerful as a Winchester. Like I said, 26 rounds. I'm just gonna fire all 26 just to really show how much firepower this has for the 80s when this was invented. And then you can kind of see the issue here, right? You have to actuate the lever each time you put in a new cartridge, okay? One, this is chambered in a proprietary cartridge, 44 Evans. If you go to some general store out in the middle of Wyoming, they're not going to have 44 Evans, you know? They're going to have 4440, they're going to have 45 Colt, they're going to have 44 Henry Rimfire, they're going to have 44 Russian, they are not going to have 45 Evans. This is going to be a weird cartridge to find. Also, I just showed you an emptying of the magazine and a complete reloading of the magazine. So I just put bullet number 26 in the chamber, right? Now the game, yeah, there's no spring in the magazine. This is entirely mechanical. Now this next thing is not represented in the game, so it's gonna be weird to explain, okay? Watch this, alright? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I put 26 rounds in the tube, okay? And then I just fired 5. We'll call the last bullet I put in the tube, we'll call that bullet Z, right? So I just fired A, B, C, D, and E, okay? Z is in the last thing in the chamber, right? Meaning that when we look at the tube here, if we look at my right thumb, Z is currently about 2 inches to the left of my right thumb, or, you know, like 5 centimeters to the left of my right thumb. Okay? Meaning that there is now 5 positions in the mechanical linkage, 5 steps on the stairs, behind Z that are currently empty. Meaning that if I wanted to reload it now, I could only put 1 bullet in the back, because then I'd have to lever it again to put a new... So I could put a new A in the back. But then if I wanted to put a new B in the back, I would have to lever it again. And that would then eject round F from the chamber. And also, while I'm doing this, there is now a 5-shot gap in the magazine between Z and A. So after I fired Z, I'd have to rack the lever 4 to 5 times to get from Z to A. As you can see, you are not reloading an Evans in combat. The Evans is insane. There's some actual use. Again, weirdly, there's like some pictures. I think there's a picture of Crazy Horse with one of these, if I remember correctly. They're the idea is good for like a sentinel rifle or like a guard or something, you know. If you are a guy guarding like a factory or guarding like a military outpost, and you just have to scare guys off, or you are expecting a quick engagement, not a prolonged military action, these are probably fine. You can probably finish your fight in 26 shots. So the Evans, you do not need to reload. You have basically twice the ammo as a Winchester, but you are not reloading an Evans in combat. Once you're out with your Evans, it's a whole process to reload, so they're really, really weird. Sadly, the game does not reflect this. because of balance. They're not going to put that insane loading method in the game. So they just act like, whoever, don't, whatever. It doesn't matter. It just works. Uh, so because of that, I'm thinking I'm gonna go with a C on it. Much like the volcanic, its performance is accurate to real life, but that's the thing, is you would never imagine it when you look at it, Evans, right? Like, you look at it and you're like, oh, this seems like a good idea. This probably works. And then you get to it and you're like, wait a minute, like, hold on. When you actually think about it for a second, you're like, I see why this thing did not catch on. Okay. Now, this next one is fun. This next one is, of course, the varmint rifle. The varmint rifle is in the game solely, this is not used for, like, fighting anyone. This is used for, like, hunting rabbits and squirrels and stuff, and not making them explode. Now, yes, much like in New Vegas. New Vegas does have a varmint rifle. The New Vegas' varmint rifle is more of a modern varmint rifle, which is, like a bolt-action 5.56. Like, if you today... So, let's talk. What is a varmint? What is vermin? Vermin are rats, rabbits, stuff like that. Stuff that will come and eat your crops, eat your food, those kind of things. A varmint is things that will eat your like, wildlife. Things that will eat your chickens. Yes, Goom, a rat rifle. So, a raccoon might come and eat your chickens. A fox might come and eat your chickens. That is what this is for. It is for, you keep this out, and, you hear your chickens freaking out, so you grab this, you go out to the garden, and you see a raccoon trying to get in the chicken house, you shoot him with this. So in the game, this is for hunting, like, small game like that. It is in 22. It is a little pump action. In real life, modern days, we have varmint rifles are more bolt action, and in 5.56, it's for longer ranges. For, like, shooting across, like, your farm. At, like, you see a coyote going across your field. You shoot him from, like, 100 yards away. Whereas this is more, there is a coyote actively trying to get into the door of your chicken coop. So you shoot it from, like, 20 feet away. These were very, very common in the first half of the 20th century. These were used everywhere. These were used these were used on amusement parks, for, like, shooting galleries. People also call these gallery guns. You could use it to, go hunt rabbits. Very versatile. This is a very, like, if you could have one gun to just kind of do whatever with, this is a very good example of them. You can see in the game, they're pump action. A lot of pump action 22s are pump action rifles. These are, like, exactly what you would use for, like, squirrels and stuff. You can hear, even in the game, very quiet. Same kind of Winchester style, because this is also a Winchester. In real life, is a Winchester 1890 is the pattern. Holds a lot of rounds. You reload it, similarly to a Henry, and this is still how they are reloaded today. This pattern of rifle is still very common today. You can still go out and buy these. There are a lot of if you are in America, your great-grandpa's first gun, if he had one, might have been something like this. A cool feature that is not in the game, but is modeled as if it were in the game. See that big knob above the trigger? That's the takedown screw. It's knurled on the side, like the top of a bottle cap, and you can unscrew that with your finger, and the top of the frame comes off, so you can just pull the gun in half, and then put it in like a bag or like a backpack or something, and go out camping, and then you put it back together in the field. It's pretty much perfect. This is exactly how this gun works. It's exactly how it looks. Uh, it they kind of nailed it with this. There's not a single issue here. So that means we are going up to S tier, folks. All right. Now, yeah, they're basically like your upgrade over a BB gun. Oh, fun thing. So there are three different types of 22. There's 22 short, 22 long, 22 long rifle, and it's basically just different lengths, so more gunpowder. Um, a pump action like this will chamber any of them. You can put short, long, or long rifle in. Bolt actions, magazine ones, fence especially, are normally only long rifle. Uh, but like you get a system like this, with some messing around with the magazine tube, you can suppress. People make these that are like suppressed, and then put 22 shorts in them, and they're basically completely silent. As you can see, when you pull that out, you can see how that would interrupt a suppressor. So they kind of have to make the barrel a little longer to accommodate a suppressor. But especially in Europe, because in Europe, suppressors are much more easy to get. Basically, in Europe, if you can buy a gun, you can buy a suppressor. Um, where in America, suppressors are much more regulated. Uh, where, yeah, because suppressors aren't like silencers. Like it's not like a James Bond like pew, you know. Uh, it's not like like suppressors are loud. Like if someone fires a rifle with a suppressor on it, you're still gonna hear it for like like 200 yards. It's just you don't get hearing damage while you're using it, when you're out hunting. So yeah, in like in Europe, a lot. If you see a lot of guys who hunt in Europe, a lot of them will have just suppressors on their rifles. Like a gun like this with a suppressor on it to go out, like hare hunting or something is actually pretty common in Europe. Where in America, suppressors are much more regulated, so that's not really the case. Um, I remember when I was looking up guns for Tiara, uh, when Kiara specifically had a 22 bolt action CZ like varmint rifle that she used as her reference image for Tiara's rifle. Looking into it, if you look almost like every picture I was finding of guys in the field in like Czechoslovakia, oh, I guess the Czech Republic and like Austria, and oh, my voice just cracked when I said Austria. Austria, stuff like that. Almost all of them had suppressors on them. Because yeah, they're not really they're. If you can get to the level where you can purchase a gun in Europe, in most countries, you can also purchase a suppressor because the understanding is that in America, if you're buying a suppressor, the idea is you're going to put it on an AR-15 and you're going to have like a tactical silenced AR-15. Where in Europe, the idea is, oh, you buy a suppressor, you put it on your hunting rifle. Now you're not getting hearing damage when you take one shot at a wild boar or one shot at a deer. It's a much more practical tool in Europe, but because in America it's regulated, it is a much more tactical device. Anyway, the next rifle, we're gonna go with the rolling block. Oh god, my rolling block's horribly rusty, and I don't have any gun oil to maintain it. So ignore the rust in the game. So rolling blocks are really interesting. Uh, rolling blocks are uh, yeah, I love the fact that you have to maintain your gun in the game. Rolling blocks are the FAL of the late 1800s. They are the NATO standard of the late 1800s before NATO existed. You don't really see much of them in America because America had its own gun, the Trapdoor Springfield, which we will get to in a moment. Um, but rolling blocks were invented right at the end of the Civil War. They are an incredibly easy action. We'll see here. Let's see. Uh, I can't really. So this is what the game considers a sniper rifle, which what annoys me to no end is the characters actually say sniper rifle all the time. Sniper rifle as a term is not until late World War One. They would call them sharpshooters rifles, potentially in this era, or target rifles. Um, a scoped rifle like this would have existed at the time, but it would have been uncommon. It would have been more for buffalo hunting, which these guns would be used. But most of the time, even at that, buffalo hunters would still be using very complex iron sights. If you remember in New Vegas, the cowboy repeater, the first lever action you get, has this big disc sight on the back. That is what is called a tang sight. And yeah, that is something like that, where it is a very fine adjustable sight that you can get on your gun to make it more accurate at range. So, you'd lay down prone, you'd sight it in, like get your dials correctly, and if you don't have a scope, that is the best thing you have. Um, so sadly in the game, you have to use a scope on the sniper rifles, which I hate. I wish I could just use this as if it were a standard single shot rifle, as was the most common of the period, but whatever. So, let's see. Can I get the? Nah, you can't even really see it from the hip. You can see it a little bit. Okay. You see how this works? Is you cock the hammer back, pull the breech, put a bullet in it, close the breech, fire. It's super easy. It is like, yeah, in Django. The Sharps rifle has in Django has a tank sight that you can really. It's like, okay, like you dial in the left, you dial in the right, you get all of it in perfectly, and then you can shoot. It was kind of even into World War One. A lot of World War One snipers you read about didn't have scopes on their sniper rifles. They had like upgraded sights and whatnot. And it wasn't until later World War One that scopes became standard for snipers. You hear about Simo Haya. Simo Haya is the famous not Russian, Finnish sniper from the Winter War, early World War II, who fought the Soviets. And he's like the most decorated sniper of all time. He didn't have a scope. He used just like a standard rifle, and his sights were just marked in and things like that. So early sniper rifles, there are a lot of snipers during the Civil War. None of them had scopes on them. They all had very intricate sights. Yeah, the White Death is what people call them and whatnot. But anyway, the rolling block. The rolling block is invented right at the end of the Civil War, like 1865. Some get sent to cavalry units. There's a debate as if any. There's debate. Did a rolling block get fired by a Union soldier at a Confederate? Who knows? The Union ordered them. Did they get there in time to actually see combat before the war ended? No one knows. But immediately after, Remington just starts churning these things out. Because it's a very cheap gun to make, it's a very easy gun to make, and because the action is so simple, you can chamber this in literally anything you want. Any gun, any bullet, as long as it has a rim, can be chambered in this gun. And every bullet had a rim, pretty much in this era. And to this day, you can buy these in modern calibers. You can buy one of these in 357 Magnum. Not from Remington, but from Italian companies that still make these. They're expensive. They're like $1,000. They weren't expensive back then. They were very cheap, an assembly line to make. But any rimmed cartridge you could buy and put in this, meaning that if you are a military and you already have a rimmed cartridge, you could buy this and just stick your cartridge you already have in this. As such, literally everybody bought these. Here, hold on. Let me go back to actually, let me walk over to my bookshelf. Where is that book? Here it is. Remington Rolling Block Military Countries of the World. Military Rifles of the World. Let me go to the table of contents. Okay, you ready, folks? You ready for this list of countries? The United States, Austria-Hungary, Belgium, Denmark, England, Canada, France, Greece, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Russia, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, Egypt, Sudan, Ethiopia, Madagascar, Morocco, French North Africa, Persia, Turkey, Yemen, Israel, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, British Honduras, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Cuba, Puerto Rico, Morocco, the Dominican Republic, Ecuador, El Salvador, French Guiana, Guatemala, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Trinidad, Uruguay, Venezuela, Cambodia, China, Japan, Korea, New Zealand, and the Philippines. That is who purchased military contracts with Remington to get their rifles supplied in cartridges that they could then use in the late 1800s. Uh, a couple of cartridges stood out. Egypt wanted a cartridge called 43 Egyptian, uh, and Spain wanted a cartridge that is called 43 Spanish. And a lot of countries, if you were in Africa, you just say, just give me the one that Egypt has. And you just, so like Sudan, Ethiopia, those guys just bought copies of the Egyptian pattern. Funnily enough, Egypt, initially, their pattern, they contracted for a bunch of them. And their first payment was not there on time. So, rather than immediately ship them to Egypt, yeah, proprietary ammo was very much a thing at that period. The first, off the top of my head, idea of people trying to standardize on an ammo was the dual alliance of Norway and Sweden in the 1880s, where they were like, hey, we are next to each other. We should fight back to back if something ever happens. We can adopt different rifles if we want, but let's, as allies, adopt the same cartridge. So Norway adopted a Krag in a 6.5 by 55, and Sweden adopted a Mauser in 6.5 by 55. And even though they're completely different rifles, different feed systems, they standardized on ammo so they could share ammo as neighbors. In case something ever happened, they could fight back to back. But anyway, that Egyptian pattern, pretty much all of South America bought, not South America, all of Africa bought, and those Egyptian rifles initially were going to be sent to Egypt. Egypt was like, we will pay in like a payment plan. Like every year, like you give us all the rifles, and then every year we'll send money to Remington. France, the Franco-Prussian War was starting, and France had Chassepot rifles, and Germany had Tracy Needle rifles, but France did not have enough rifles. So France was like, we need rifles now. So France was like, okay, wait, Remington, do not ship those rifles to Egypt. They're going to pay in monthly payments. We will pay you in gold bars the entire payment right now up front if you give them to us immediately. And Remington was like, all right. So they diverted the shipment to France and just sold them to France. And France kept these all the way into World War I, where they were then rechambering them to the modern bullets that they were using in World War I, the 8mm Lebel. And Egypt was very angry about this, which would lead to issues with Egypt and France and Remington later when Egypt wanted to buy revolvers from them. But yeah, this was like the go-to. The 43 Spanish is kind of the cartridge you would find the most in South America. Like every South American cartridge, like country that had these, would just chamber them in the same cartridge that Spain had them in. So 43 Spanish is the most common caliber this is found in. In America, either 45-70s or 43 Spanish is like very common with these. There's a famous photo of Wild Bill Hickok with a one of these that is in the like Venezuelan pattern that he used for buffalo hunting. That was in 43 Spanish. But yeah, it's not really a gun you think of when you think of like the go-to American gun. But it's kind of like that Smith & Wesson revolver I talked about earlier, where there are like when you think of buffalo rifle, you think of Sharps. That is like the go-to, the Sharps buffalo rifle. These were also used for that. They weren't the most used in America, but there are far more of these than there are Sharps because these were sold to foreign militaries, like the Smith & Wessons. But anyway, for its in-game performance, it's pretty much perfect. It's exactly how it should be, except it's always got the scope attached to it. Like you can't take the scope off or use it with iron sights. So with that, We're gonna come over, and I think we'll go A with it. I think we'll go A just because of that scope issue. All right, so back to now. Notice that in that list of guns, America was not listed. That is because America was using these trapdoor Springfields. Being that the Civil War just happened, America had a ton of muskets that they made for the Civil War. Now the Civil War is over. What do we do with all these muskets? Because muskets are now going into the Civil War. Muskets were state of the art. 5 years later, when the Civil War ends, muskets are no longer state of the art. Breech loaders are here with metallic cartridges. What do we do? So a guy named Allen, I don't know his first name, but that was his last name, is like, wait, you can see, when you look at this looks like a musket, you know? What he does is he's like, wait, we can just cut the back of the musket off, and then just put the top, if we take a musket, right, we go to the back, and we cut the top off, so it becomes like a straw for like a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. We can then put a little latch on the top that has a firing pin in it that the hammer hits. So, I'll show you how this works here, yeah. You go, fire it, and then see how you open the latch on the top?
Here.
I'm calling my horse. Yeah, so that is how that happens. It is single shot. The original Allens were in a rimfire called 5070. Also what the original rolling blocks were chambered in. And a lot of the American, marked rolling blocks are in 5070 from that era. Like the New York State Militia bought a bunch of rolling blocks in 5070, things like that. Now, what would happen is, by the 1870s, they're like, wait a minute, rimfire, not the way to go. Centerfire is the way to go. So they update it. 4570 is the cartridge they land on, so they neck it down a little bit. And now these are no longer converted muskets. They just start making them from the factory like this. In 4570 centerfire. And this becomes the 1873 Springfield, which is the standard U.S. Army rifle for the 1870s and 1880s. This cartridge, 4570, is still used today in lever actions and single shots for hunting. People hunt bears with it. People hunt deer and elk with it. It is still very common. You will notice 4440, 4570, 45 Colt, all 1873. 1873 is kind of the year where ammo kind of changed in America and became standardized as okay, this is how ammo works. All of it happened in the same year. This was the most common single shot in the Army. And the game does a pretty good job with it, except, you will see, it's insanely short. This gun so there are two versions of this gun. There's the rifle and the carbine. The rifle has a 30-inch barrel. The carbine has a 22-inch barrel. The rifle has the wood go all the way to the end of the barrel, right? Like a musket, like a traditional musket. The carbine has the wood only go halfway, and then the barrel sticks out like it did on the rolling block that you saw a minute ago. This has, bizarrely, the stock of the rifle, but scaled down to the length of the carbine. It's really weird. I don't know why they did that, because it's not like they had to make the gun super short for any reason, because the rolling block is the length that this gun should be. So, I don't know. But yeah, performance-wise, it makes sense. Historically, also makes sense. Native Americans, you see a lot of photos of Native Americans or indigenous tribes using these, from capturing them in battles with the cavalry. But, yeah, so in the game, it's pretty good, but the model's weird. Weirdly enough, actually, yeah. Hold on, let's go back to the game really quick. Weirdly, I believe the HUD icon is actually correct. Yeah, you can see there. See how the stock kind of stops on the HUD icon and the barrel goes longer? This is what it should look like. But it doesn't. I don't know why. I don't know why they modeled it that way. It's very weird. So I'm gonna go in either a B or a C. Yeah, it's exactly what you. All the sound in this game is perfect. Every gun sounds exactly how it should. Um, I think I'm gonna go with a C on it because it's just so visually bizarre. Um, the the oh yeah, that's another weird thing in the game that they constantly refer to machine. There are a few moments in the game where you use a machine gun, and they constantly refer to them as Gatling guns. The characters do. Uh, and now I don't know. Now you would, even though they're all Maxim guns, there are no Gatling guns in this game. They are all Maxim guns, even though Maxim guns would not really be in America at this time. Uh, there are no Gatling guns in this game. Even though Gatling guns would be the primary automatic weapon of this era, all the characters call them Gatling guns, and I don't think it is a thing of characters calling the Gatling guns, calling the Maxim guns Gatling guns, because in their brain, Gatling gun just means machine gun. Because remember, they use terms like sniper rifle and stuff like that, which would not be, does not exist at this time. So I think it's like a weird in-game thing, where like they had already recorded all the voice lines, but then in development they changed the Gatling guns for Maxim guns. Even though, like I said, Maxim guns wouldn't really be around at this point. They would be Colt 1895 Browning like system guns. It's very weird. I'm very curious as to what happened in the production there. Anyway, here we have the Krag. My Krag currently has a scope on it, which is not accurate. Ignore the scope. But the Krag is very weird. It is very much what you imagine a modern rifle to look like, right? Like a modern bolt-action rifle from this side. Where the Krag... Well, so the Krag is from Denmark. Remember that... oh, yeah, I do have to kill this up. Well, yeah, so here's the Krag. The Krag is... what do you imagine a 20th century bolt-action rifle to look like, for the most part? From this side. Like I said, ignore the scope. Where it gets weird... you can actually now you can actually aim without the scope on it, I believe, in a way. Didn't mean to pull up my. Oh no, yeah, with the scope you can't use the iron sights with the scope, but close enough. Where it gets weird, watch if we see with the reload. We're used to like stripper clip loaded, top down Mauser pattern stuff like that. You will see where a Krag gets weird. Yeah. Krags, you can't really see it too well in the game. Actually, maybe in third person. Yeah, still not too easy. Krags have, you can kind of see that box right in front of the bolt? Krags have a weird system. Yeah, it's like a magazine that you open from the bottom, and you feed the rounds one by one in the bottom. Now, what this is for is, at this time, this was being developed right before like stripper clips and stuff were fully standardized. They were being standardized, but they weren't fully standardized. So what this is for, right, is the idea that Germany in not World War I, but World War II, Germany captured a bunch of these from Norway, and just used them in like their Norwegian troops and guards and stuff. They actually built some that are that use the action but are in the shape of a Car 98K, they're weird. Norway though adopted these in the 1880s, and they used them all the way up until the end of World War II. Norway is one of the few countries that did not update their rifle in between the world wars in any capacity. Um, but these are from Denmark. Norway also immediately adopted them, but bizarrely, America also adopted them. Uh, it's a weird thing to where these were the American standard rifle during the 1890s. This is what we fought in the Philippines with. This is what we fought in Cuba against the Spanish with. Uh, they're very strange. I've held a couple. You find them in America, like at gun shops and what not. They were very popular for hunting in the early half of the 20th century, buying like surplus ones cheap. Uh, famously in To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch uses one of these to kill a rabid dog. It's at one point in the book. But why the magazine is like this? All right, most video games do not take this into account. Okay, imagine you have a rifle, right? You fire the rifle, a bolt action rifle. You fire the rifle. You open the bolt. You've ejected the spent cartridge, right? Like you're being charged, right, or something. You close the bolt. Uh, you now are. You now have one round in the chamber, 3 in the magazine. The charge runs away, right? The charge has been repelled. You want to now reload. You want to have maximum capacity. You open the bolt again. You just ejected round B, right? So now you only have 3 rounds in the gun. And now it's kind of weird putting round a new A and B in there because you can't do it with your stripper clip because that has 5 rounds on it. It's kind of that issue back with the Mauser, the C96, where it's like a weird trying to fit rounds and magazines. This is a thing that would persist all the way until the end of World War II. Like you still could, like M1 Garands had this problem. Car 98Ks have this problem. Also, the idea becomes this is an era of magazine cutoffs. The idea of like, what if we have a little thing that held the magazine in place? So you put your 5 rounds in, and then you flip a switch, and rounds B, C, D, and E do not move when you cycle the bolt. So you can fire the gun as if it was a single shot, and then a charge comes, an emergency. You flip the switch, and then you go, right? That's not how this works. This works because you are not loading it from the top. You're loading it from the side. You can have a round in the chamber and still put bullets in the magazine. So let's say, a charge comes, you fire 2 shots. You fire 1, you fire 2, you chamber round 3, the charge is repelled. You now have 2 extra rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. You can open the bottom of the magazine, put in 2 more rounds, close it. You now did not need to open the chamber, anything like that. You're good. You can also, fire a round, bolt it, open the chamber, stick a new round in, close. Open the magazine, stick a new round in, close, fire, bolt, magazine. Do that, and you will now have a steady fire of like bang, 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 and then when a charge comes, you have a full magazine. It turns out most of that is just kind of like min-maxing and doesn't really matter. And it turns out, even though that idea seems better on paper, those kind of problems of like, oh, I have 1 in the chamber and I have 2 in the magazine and I kind of but I have 5 round stripper clips. It turns out soldiers will just fire until their gun is empty, and then they will put in 5 new rounds. So this whole system, it makes sense on like a if you were designing like a TTRPG or something for guns, but in actual practicality, no one really cares. But the game mostly reflects this. There is one issue, which is, watch this. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So remember I said the whole genius of the Krag is that, like right now I have a round in the chamber, and then I have one in the magazine, right? But then if I reload, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay. But, do you see that at the end there? The whole point of the Krag is that when you reload, if you have a round in the chamber, you don't have to bolt it. But for some reason in the game, after you reload and get the gun, yeah, you chamber it. You eject the cartridge that you have in the chamber. Which, the entire point of the Krag is that you don't need to do that, but the game does it as if it were like a Mauser or something. And also, it's a little short. This is more of what a 1930s Swedish Krag, or like a 1912 Norwegian Krag carbine would be. Not exactly accurate to what a, you don't lose any ammo in the game. The game acts like it's like the game keeps track as ammo as if it was just normal. So it's just an animation oversight. Yeah. So I think I'll want to go with C for it because the gun is too short for the 1890s, and it kind of has an error of that whole purpose. Okay. Now this is the big one. This next one is the "Oh no, Rockstar, what are you doing?" This gun is, where is it? Oh wait, did I not bring it? It might be in my, here, hold on. Well then, quickly. To the homestead! It might be in my weapon locker. To the homestead! Let's go! This next gun is kind of the inspiration for why I wanted to do this tier list. Because I was like, this gun makes me so angry. That I was like, it boggles my mind why this is in the game. It makes absolutely no sense. I do not know why this is here. Let's see. Some slight spoilers for post-game Red Dead 2 of where you are and whatnot. But quick, to the homestead. Yeah.
Howdy, John.
Not now, Uncle. I have to go into the bathroom, which is where the guns are kept for some reason. Let's see. Locker. No, it doesn't say it's in the locker there. Where is the gun then? Hold on, let's see. That's very odd. I don't see it in my, even though I know I have one, I don't see it here. I guess I'll run to a gun shop really quick and just see if I have to repurchase one. I should have had one, but let's see. I know there's a fast travel over here.
Why, hey, sir.
Not now, Jack. Alright, let's see. Let's go to Valentine. Let's see, why isn't this in alphabetical order? Okay, yeah. So, well, I'll tell you what gun should be here, right? So, a gun that Americans would have potentially been running into at this period was the Mauser 1893. The Mauser 1893 was bought by pretty much almost the entirety of South America, and it is chambered in 7mm Mauser. The only countries that did not buy the 1893 are the countries that had already bought the 1895, the 1889, such as Argentina and Peru. Peru bought them from Argentina. But Mexico, pretty much all of South America, like every Latin American country, a lot of the Caribbean bought 1893 Mausers in 7mm Mauser. These were used by the Spanish-American War in Cuba. These were in the Philippines. These are all over the place. Let's see.
Yeah.
Hello,
Welcome.
sir.
Okay, let's have a look.
Rifles.
Howdy.
Okay, yeah. Carcano. Here it is, folks.
Smile on your face.
Now,
guaranteed.
let's just put this in the correct style.
I'd like to give this
Actually,
a
you know what?
personal touch with
That's
some
pretty close
engraving.
to the actual like style and whatnot. So let me go somewhere where I can shoot
That's all
and
done
not
there.
be in trouble.
Bye.
Let's go. Okay, up into the woods here. So, like I was saying, the 1893 Mauser. So this is the final sniper rifle you get. And its thing is that it is a magazine-fed bolt-action sniper rifle in the game. And the 1893 Mauser would have accomplished that. Well, also, it takes strip for clips, so it would be an improvement over the Krag, but it is also, magazine fed, so it's an improvement over the rolling block. Let's see, you can shoot up here and not have the police called on you. Now, this gun, well, let me rephrase. This action does exist in the 1890s. This is an 1891 Carcano rifle, which was the standard firearm of Italy. It is a bolt action. It takes a Mannlicher style N-block clip, like an M1 Garand does. But, so, one, these would not be in America in the late 1890s. There is no reason why a Carcano would ever be in America in the 1890s. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that this is not an 1890s pattern Carcano. This is a 1938 pattern Carcano. I do not, like, function-wise, this is how a 1938 pattern Carcano should work. This is what it should look like. And like I said, function-wise, everything, it's all good. We nailed it, folks. We did it. It just should not be here. I do not know why this is in the game. This absolutely should not anywhere be in the game. There are so many better choices that this could be in the game that there could be explanations for. The Lee Navy straight pull, the Metford rifle from England, like I said, the Spanish rifle from the Latin American countries. It is utterly bizarre. The only thing I could possibly think of, for whatever reason, is this gun in this configuration with this kind of scope was allegedly used by Lee Harvey Oswald in the Kennedy assassination for some reason. Is because at that point it was cheap World War II surplus in the early 60s. I don't know why that is in this game. This gun would not be common in America for another 50 to 60 years. It is so strange that it's in this game for seemingly no reason. Yeah, there's so many other guns that fit this in exact parameters of this gun, but would have been historically accurate. It's so strange. So I'm gonna go. We got our D, folks, because it just should not be here. I do not know why it's here. It didn't exist yet. It wouldn't exist for a very long time. I just am baffled by why this is in the game. All right, then let's move on to the shotguns. Then the final weapon category. Come over here, horse. Okay, so the first shotgun that you get is actually a handgun shotgun. It is the sawed-off shotgun. Now, this idea of like a pistol grip sawed-off shotgun like this is, well, this type of shotgun is a very common 1870s and 1880s pattern shotgun. It's called a hammerlock. To break open double barrel shotgun. Two triggers, each pull of the trigger, fires the barrel. Very common to that era. It's modeled pretty much how it should be. The weird thing, so historically, people did use these. Not as much as it was like most of the time they wouldn't cut off the stock. You would just cut the barrel down and then keep the stock. If you really wanted a very short, handy shotgun. There are a few cases of cutting on the stock. Mostly in like cities where you have to hide a shotgun like under a coat or something. Like nefarious deeds. There is one bizarre case. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. But there's a sheriff. I think it was like Frank Thornwell or something like that. His name is something like that or something similar. Where he had one of these made and then carried it around in like a leather holster. It's very strange. Which is, you see a lot of characters do this and do that in this game. But historically, only one guy that I know of ever did that. It's pretty much what you'd expect it to be. Now, the weird thing comes in with the lore in the game. This is not a sawed-off shotgun as per the game's lore, just for the fact that it is called sawed-off shotgun. What this gun is called, what this gun is described as in the game, is a from-the-factory sawed-off shotgun. If you read the catalog page for this gun, it is sold as a shotgun pistol by the company in the game's lore. This was actually a thing, IRL. Not as common. Most of the time, if you find an old gun like this, which are now illegal in America post-1934, it will be someone took a shotgun and they cut it up. There are a few instances. In England, for example, specifically British India, they would make guns like this that are called howdah pistols. Howdahs are the basket that sits on top of an elephant. So if you're in India and you are hunting and you are sitting on top of an elephant, and then a tiger jumps onto your elephant, a Webley or what other service pistol you have of the era is not going to stop a tiger. But a double barrel, essentially sawed-off shotgun that is essentially shooting slugs. That's not exactly what they are. The howdahs are this layout, but they are usually rifled barrels, and they're not shotguns. They are chambering very large bore, basically rifle calibers, right? So it is a small double barrel rifle that you can carry in a holster that when a big animal jumps on you when you're on safari, you can take it out and fire both barrels really quick. These would eventually evolve. Lancaster would make a very fancy one that is a 4-barrel, slightly smaller caliber, but 4-shot, double-action trigger. And that's a very cool-looking gun. It's very sleek. It's a very steampunk-looking gun. And it is these idea behind all of these are very much there is an animal attacking me, and a normal revolver or pistol round will not do the trick to stop it, so I have to get it off now. And that's what these are for. There's also a gun called the Ithaca Auto Burglar from the 1920s that is a from the factory sawed-off shotgun, though its grip is very weird. Its grip is like a hacksaw grip. Like it's like a 90-degree angle. And those are only in 20 gauge. But the idea of those is that you keep it in your car, and if someone tries to like carjack you on the highway by coming up to your window, you can then just turn a sawed-off shotgun onto them and blast them through the window. These only existed for about a decade because they were made illegal by the 1934 NFA. So the Rockstar kind of combines these ideas. It is the layout and performance of the criminal, like, guy going around with like a sawed-off shotgun and a violin case kind of thing, right? That you would imagine of a sawed-off shotgun, with the availability and the commercialness of the Howdah and the Ithaca Auto Burglar. So that's a kind of creative way to go about why you would want to buy a sawed-off shotgun from a catalog, because technically speaking, you could buy a sawed-off shotgun from the catalog in the 1920s. So it's kind of gotten into a loophole for gameplay reason. One of the few loopholes Alex Q's in the game. Performance-wise, it's as you would expect. Implementation, it isn't as common as they are in real life, but they're there to where it's there for the fantasy. So I actually have really no complaints about it. So we're going up to S. You folks are going to see a pattern when it comes to shotguns. That is a shotgun joke, as the shotgun accuracy is called patterning. The next shotgun, like I said, this is about 1870s. Now, what that gun would be cut down from is this the one? No, that is the non-colored one. Where is the... Or is that... Yeah, okay, my main one is still in the armory, but... Because you can... A weird thing about the game is you can sometimes pick up two guns. So, just kind of ignore the coloring a little bit. Just imagine that this is all blued, like the sawed-off was. And this is what you would buy to then saw off. This is a very standard double-barrel shotgun. This is the gun of the West. In the late 1800s, if somebody had one gun, it was probably something like this. If they lived on like a ranch or something, if they were in the like a city in the east, they'd probably have like a little 32 like pocket pistol if they had one gun. But if they were on the west, they would either have like that 22 varmint rifle or something like this. This you can load with birdshot and hunt birds. You could load it with buckshot, hunt deer, hunt bear. You could load it with slugs and hunt bear. The slugs won't be too accurate out of a double barrel. They will still be accurate enough to kill a bear. You could load it with buckshot to, defend yourself. Barrel-wise, from the factory, these would have about 28-inch barrels. But that is for hunting and whatnot. People would, if you were to use this for combat or defense, they would normally shorten the barrels to about 20 or 18 inches. I have one of these. I went to a gun shop looking to see if they had a double barrel shotgun that I could shorten to the legal length. I was looking at the ones they had. They were all about $500. I was like, I do not want to spend $500 to do this. I asked them, do you have any like in the back or whatever? I could go much more into detail and have this like Kiara style and describe, beat for beat. But we're just at the 3-hour mark, so I'll keep it a little tight. I asked them, do they have any in the back? The guy says, yeah, we have one, but I don't think you'd want it. And I was like, let me just see it. He comes back out from the stock, from the back of the stock to about 20 inches of the barrel. The gun is perfect. And then the front 8 inches of the barrel is just horribly rusted. It was like someone left the gun in a bucket, and then it rained in the bucket, and then they left it there for like a decade, And I'm like, that's perfect. I'm trying to make a coach gun, like an Old West, short barreled shotgun. I'm going to cut these barrels down to 18.5 inches. So yeah, this is great. And he was like, all right, like 250. So I was like, perfect. So I got that, and yeah, it's sitting up, hanging up on my wall over there. I brought it home, cut the barrels, filed them flat to a square at 18 3/8 inches. Uh, Drilled and tapped a new front sight bead into it. Resoldered the end with a nice muzzle cap. Blued the front. And now, yeah, I have mine doesn't have hammers. Mine's a hammerless design, which is called a box lock. Those did exist in the 1800s, though it is like they came onto the scene in like the late 1870s, and it is like every year you would see them kind of become more common as the years go by until about 1900. 1900 is when you're at like 50-50 side lock, box lock. And then in 20th century is when you'd be fully box lock. So you can get cowboy guns that don't have hammers, but you can get, but most of the classic cowboy days had hammers. But performance in the game, it's about what you'd expect. You can't really, I can't think of a single game that does double barrel shotguns wrong. You can actually even see the texturing on the barrel there, how there's kind of a ribbedness to it. That is because these are called Damascus barrels, which rather than like forge out a big piece of metal, they make like a 12 gauge, or you take a 12 gauge rod. So a rod that is the diameter of a 12 gauge, like barrel. And then you slowly wrap iron around it, right? Then you just wrap iron around and around and around while heating it up so it welds itself all together, and then you take the rod out the middle, and now you have a wrapped barrel. This is fine for a black powder, but when you get to smokeless powder, these will explode if you try to load a higher pressure smokeless round into it. But in the black powder days, these are fine. Problem with the game, of course, I don't see any smoke. I mean, these are probably smokeless powder loads, because remember the whole black powder discussion I had earlier. But let's just go to, again, back to the tier list. You can't really do a double barrel wrong. That's pretty perfect. Now, when we get to the when we get to the early 1880s, there's a gun that is not in the game that is the Spencer shotgun, right? Now, the Spencer shotgun is the first pump-action shotgun. It's very weird looking. It is not in this game. It is in a few games. It is in Hunt Showdown, and bizarrely, it is the shotgun in BioShock. I do not know why it is the shotgun in BioShock. BioShock is in the 1960s. I do not know why there's an 1880s pump-action shotgun in there. But in the early 1880s, there's a very weird pump-action shotgun that exists, right? And I just noticed something. Look at that. Look at the stock where the butt plate meets the stock. I think there's a modeling, like a texture issue there. We can see the grass between the stock and the butt plate. Huh. But yeah. So in the 1880s, John Browning, again, there's not a lot of Browning guns in this game, but this was the era of Browning. Especially the early 20th century. Every classic American gun from the early 20th century was designed by John Browning, pretty much. Do you remember that Pump Action 22 that I shared earlier? That was also John Browning. The 1911 would be John Browning. Remember that when I said the American machine gun should be in this game? That's also John Browning. The Winchester replacements, their updated lever actions in the 1890s, also John Browning. I own one of those, the Winchester 94. John Browning is like the best gun designer ever. He designed pretty much, like, if you think of an American gun type, like a type of gun that was used in America in the early 1900s, every single one of them, except the revolvers, was designed by John Browning. The semi-auto 22s, the lever action 22s, the pump action 22s, the lever action rifles, the single shot rifles, the pump action shotguns, the lever action shotguns, the semi-automatic shotguns, all of them Browning. This is the start of Browning's shotgun journey here, which we will go through the game, through like the next couple of minutes. So, Browning says, Winchester, I've got a pump action shotgun design for you. It's going to be great. Winchester says, we don't make pump actions. At this time, Colt made pump action rifles. There's a pump action rifle called the Colt Lightning Rifle. That would have been cool to have in the game. It basically looks like a Winchester, but with a pump instead of a lever. Now, Winchester says, we do not do pumps, we do levers. Make a lever action shotgun. So Browning's like, alright, fine. So he makes this. The 1897 lever action shotgun. Chambered in both 12 and 10 gauge. They are the first really successful repeating shotgun. They were popular in the 1880s and 1890s among... We look at it as in the game, we look at it as like for combat, you know? They're more for sportsmen. They would have, when you would buy them, normally they would have like 30-inch barrels. And what this is for is so you can fire 3 shots at ducks and geese and stuff that are flying by without having to reload. But you could also, you know, a sheriff could carry one of these, or maybe a stagecoach messenger, and with the full magazine, have 6 shots. So you guys went from double barrels to a 6-shot lever action shotgun. Now the action is insane. You can see how this loads. You'll see in a second. Yeah, you open the top and then you feed it through the top into the tube at the bottom. It's very weird, and you can't really see the open lever in the game, but the mechanism is entirely out there. If you drop this in the mud, it just would not work ever. It's a very weird gun because lever actions are not really made for shotguns. But Browning was told make a lever action shotgun, so he did because he could, because that's what Browning does. If you tell him make this, he'll just make it because he can figure out how to make it. Like I said, these were kind of popular in that era, but everyone kind of knew they weren't the best. So in 1893, this is famous for its use in the Terminator. In Terminator 2, he has the sawed-off one that he, spins around on the lever, all that stuff. The actual factory one is like a full shotgun rifle. Mine in the game has rifle sights on it, to which I would really like to in real life. I found note of historical examples that do this. So loading that with a slug, right? If you took one of these, had the barrel rifled, you could order this from Winchester if you wrote a letter to Winchester asking for this specifically. You can have a sight put on these, have the barrel rifled, and then make very heavy-duty brass slugs. And this just turned from a 10-gauge shotgun into what is essentially a 75 caliber rifle by loading this with slugs. It's a very cool idea, and I'd love to build one day, just as an insane kind of concept. But what is also happening at the time is this. This also I have the sight on just because in the game you put the sights on. Even though most of the time shotguns won't have rear sights like that, it'll just be smooth on the back. Okay, so there's a bit of a story to this one. Winchester is all right, Browning, make the gun you want to make. So but they're but keep it Winchester shape. So he makes this, which is a pump action 12-gauge shotgun with a kind of Winchester shaped frame. You can see it has an exposed hammer. That's very weird to us nowadays, a shotgun with an exposed hammer. The original ones are from 1893, and they are for black powder frames. mid 1890s, like 1895, smokeless powder really becomes big in America. So Winchester immediately is like, okay, they update the model to have a stronger frame. So now it takes smokeless powder. So the 1897, when this game is set in the late 1890s, the 1893 would have been more common, but they're basically the same gun. But this is kind of this is the grandfather of all modern shotguns. You know, folks, we got a Kiara tweet. Kiara tweet. She's back home in Austria, as I assumed. Yeah, gonna write a tweet to Kiara real quick. Quick reply. Alright. See, I figured Kiara and Narissa were back because they didn't tweet for a while. And Kiara did that lizard tweet, and I was like, that feels either delayed or like it is scheduled to be a mid-flight tweet. Let me just smugly reply to me saying that in Discord. Where is that? Feels weird. I've been streaming immediately since I woke up. So that does feel slightly odd to me. Like time-wise. Let's see. Go to my post, reply with Pomu sunglasses, hit enter. Alright, back to the game. Yeah, so when you think of a modern shotgun, this is what it looks like. John Pratting, he's done it again, folks. He has designed the modern layout for what we imagine a gun to look like. And yeah, that's it. Like, this is what a shotgun works like nowadays. This is what shotguns sound like. This is how shotguns are, and it is all from John Browning. He laid it all out. And the game again does it perfectly. It would be updated a bit. Oh wait, I forgot to tier list the 1897. Yeah, like I said, pretty much perfect. S tier for the 1897. And the 1897 also, we're going S tier. It is also perfectly implemented. It's exactly how it should be. Like I said, you will notice, the shotgun sweep at the end of the game here, at the end of this tier list. But we have one final shotgun, and there's a bit of a moral conundrum with it. With updates to this, you can imagine. So see where my thumb is, my right thumb. Watch the bolt, okay? Look at that. If you hold the trigger in this, you actually hold the bolts open. Actually, wait, no, I have the tier list still up. Okay. So see where my right thumb is? Okay. Like where you would imagine a thumb would be on a shotgun. And then if you hold the trigger down, you actually hold the bolts open. So watch that. Okay. That bolt is pretty close to my thumb there. right? On a lever action, this is okay, because, let me grab the, actually, well, no, because these don't have bolts like that, but, where is it? Yeah, this will do. Okay, on a lever action, this is fine, because you were using your right hand to lever the rifle. So, the fact that the bolts and hammers coming back doesn't matter. On the shotgun, though, you're pumping with your left hand, meaning that your right thumb is right in the path of that bolt. So there is a lot of stories of people scratching up their thumbs pretty badly, pumping back or cutting their thumbs, pumping a 1897, and hitting their right thumb, which is why the next pump action shotgun, the update, not done by John Browning, done by John Pedersen, because pumps just work much, much better with a cartridge that is the size of a shotgun shell, that diameter. John Pedersen, who John Browning would actually call Pedersen the greatest firearm designer alive. If John Browning didn't design it and it was an American gun from the early 1900s, there's a good chance Pedersen might have had some involvement. He did much more of the stuff in the 1910s and 1920s. He modified it a bit and completely encased it to become the Winchester Model 12, which is exactly the shape of what every modern shotgun looks like. But there's one final gun, one final Browning design. And that is a gun that has two names. This gun, in America, was sold as the Remington Model 11. In Europe, it was sold as the FN Auto 5. But it is basically the same gun. Now, this is semi-automatic. Browning brings this to Winchester, right? And he's like, Winchester, look at this. It's a semi-automatic shotgun. It's great. Winchester's like, we don't want to eat into sales of our pump action. Our pump action is selling great. We don't want to get this going too much, you know? Because we just committed to the pump action shotgun. Now we don't want to replace it all with the semi-auto shotgun because the pump action shotgun is selling well. So Winchester is like, okay, I'll go sell it to Remington. He goes to Remington. He's sitting in the office of the Remington company. The Remington CEO, like 5 feet away from him, like he's sitting in the waiting room for the office, like 10 feet away on the other side of the door. Remington CEO has a heart attack and dies. So Remington goes into chaos. Browning brings this design to FN in Europe. And it's like, hey, FN, can you guys make this? They're like, yeah, sure. They make it, sell it to Europe. Then Browning comes back to America. Remington is now fixed. He gets to deal with Remington instead of Winchester. And the Remington starts making these, and it becomes the most successful semi-automatic shotgun of the era. So this would be the main competitor to Winchester's pump action, would be Remington's semi-auto. Now, mostly used for bird hunting and whatnot. Because semi-automatic shotguns have they're very good now, but they had a much higher failure rate because they kind of have to work with loads. You know, you kind of have to tweak the gun to the load. Yeah, if you have a malfunction while bird hunting, the malfunction is going to happen after you fire your shot. So you fire one shot, you still probably hit the birds. You just can't fire a second shot to get even more birds if you have a malfunction. In a police situation, or a military situation, that is bad because now your gun stopped in the middle of combat. So these were not really used much for police or military. You will find some. You'll find some pictures from like the 1920s through the 50s of police using these. Not really military. But these were in use. And a lot of criminals used these. Clyde of Bonnie and Clyde fame had one of these that he sawed the barrel off of, and then he shortened the stock, and then he put a strap around. And he carried it over his shoulder and then he would wear a trench coat, and he just had it like under there with a hole in the coat pocket that he would stick his hand through. So he was holding the gun through a hole in the pocket that was around his shoulder, and then when he would go to rob a bank, he'd just pull it up really quick, and it would be right on his shoulder immediately. His hands already on the grip, all like that kind of stuff. If you really want to look into weird, crazy, like almost diesel punk guns, those bank robbers from around circa 1933, 1935 had crazy guns. Like full auto 1911s with a Tommy gun pistol grip on it and a compensator. Babyface Nelson used one of those. They're really weird. They're insane, like all the stuff these guys built. But anyway, this gun was designed in 1899 and produced in Europe in 1900, but not produced in America until 1905. Meaning that for the majority of this game, this is actually not technically historically accurate. You could knock out one of these. Performance-wise, it's perfect. It's exactly how it should work. But there is a part of this game that is in a time skip in 1907 where this would exist. That is currently where we are right now. So in the first half of this game, this gun does not exist yet. In the second half of this game, this gun would have been available. I kind of wish they kept it till you couldn't get it until the later half of the game. That would make it more historically accurate, along with some of the other semi-automatic pistols. There's actually a funny thing. You run into guys. This also might be an oversight back with like the Gatling gun thing. You run into guys in the missions that are set in 1907. You meet a couple of guys that have C96 Mausers, and John Marston's there, and John Marston says, like, what are those? Like, what guns are those that those guys are carrying? But at this point, I, as Arthur Morgan, had already been carrying C96 Mausers since, like, 2 chapters prior. And there is a scene in, like, chapter, 4 of this game where John Marston gets pistol whipped by a C96 Mauser. So he knows what these guns are. But the game... So there's a few guns in this that it feels like they were supposed to show up post-time skip, but something in the balancing changed, and they included them earlier. But the story, the narrative elements, imply that they are still new in the post-time skip era. It's very odd. So that leaves me in quite a dilemma with this, the final gun in the game, the last gun to be created historically. And because it is the last gun to be created historically, where does it go? Well, aside from this, but this at least in the action. Does it go in S tier, because it is a perfect representation of the Browning of the Remington Model 11? Does it go in D, because it does not exist in the first half of the game, but it does exist in the second half of the game? Does it go in B, right in the middle? Who knows? This is quite something to discuss, and much to ponder. I think for now, we'll go in B, as a kind of, middle ground. So, what do we want to call these? I think that, so this is pretty much it, We'll call this one historically accurate. Perfect, okay? This we'll call slight balance issue. We'll call this we'll call this one notable error. We'll say egregious error. Is that how you spell egregious? Oh my god, it is. I nailed it. And then we'll call this did not exist. yet. And there we have it, folks. We've done it. So I'm gonna say, actually no, hold on. From I'll put this into just like. Yeah, no, I'll leave that as it is. Because this is actually no, I'll put small error. Just so they're fine, but they got a little something going on with them that's not perfect. But yeah, we got it. This is it. So overall, they did a pretty good job with. I'm gonna actually move the Springfield up then in that case, because its only error is its length. I wouldn't call that egregious. And I guess also the crag too, because the crag isn't perfect. It does kind of get rid of the whole point of the crag, but it functions mostly as it should. It's just that little animation error. So most of the notable errors are either a little balance thing or the model isn't exactly correct. The egregious error. Oh no, I'll move the crag down. Because it's the model thing and it's the length too. These are all mostly just the length or the power or something. The egregious errors are, if you notice, they're all weird guns. The historically accurate ones are all guns that are perfectly fine. Like, they're guns that we know how they work. The small errors are guns that we know how they work, but they're not super common, so there's a slight oversight. The notable errors are, yeah, pretty much kind of the same thing. They're a little more uncommon. So, like, how were they? You know, they made the Henry a little bit too strong and a little bit too short. So where it's noticeable if you know how a Henry works. The egregious errors are all really weird, rare guns, you know? These are all guns that are very bizarre. Guns that failed pretty much immediately after they came out. Except for the Krag and Norwegian service. Because of that weird thing where Norway never updated their guns. But their rarity has led to oversights that I guess I'm assuming the developers probably got some hands-on action with, you know, like a double-barrel shotgun from the era. Very common. I'm not sure if they had as much easy access to be able to go to the range and fire and function a volcanic pistol, you know, because those are incredibly rare and uncommon. And the ammo for it does not exist. It has not existed for like 150 years almost. Not even almost, literally. 150, 170 years at this point. And then again, the final thing, the Carcano did not exist. And it would not exist until much later after the game has ended. So, that's the tier list, folks. We've got it. We now have the definitive how good are the guns in Red Dead. Yeah, this is just something. I was like, this will probably take an hour. It took 3.5. And this is me also giving the shortened versions. I could have explained much more about some of these guns and their stories. But again, like I said, I went with the shorter ones. There are a lot of guns that the game does not have that I wish it did have. The Sharps rifle, like I said, I wish it did have. Oh, the Merwin and Herbert revolvers are very strange revolvers that existed in the mid-1880s. Where you twisted the barrel sideways and then pulled it forward, and the cylinder would go forward a little bit. and then but the cartridges would would hook onto a lip on the back that would pull them out, and then you'd close the gun. But it was the machining was so tight on them that they had a vacuum seal. Like if you pull it forward and then let go, it starts to slowly move back on its own, and that is not by spring force or anything. That is from the tightness of the machining and how close it is that it created a vacuum on the arbor pin. They're very weird, interesting guns that come in a lot of different configurations. Like I mentioned, the Colt pump action competitors to the Winchester, which are basically just pump action Winchesters. They're very neat. There's a lot of stuff from this era that's weird that would have been cool to see. The other double actions, the Smith & Wesson top break double actions, the Colt double actions, Derringers, little two-shot, like pocket Derringers with 2 barrels, that kind of stuff. A musket would have been fun. Muskets were still Civil War surplus muskets were all over the place. All the weird Civil War carbines that I've talked about. Now, obviously, none of these would be weird to balance. Most of them would be bad and had no reason to be used in the game. They would just be for the neatness of, like, oh, look, a Civil War Smith carbine. What a bizarre thing to have exist in the game. More just kind of Old West gun aficionado fan service, which is what I would have loved. But alas. Though the M93, the Spanish Mauser 93, that definitely should have been in the game instead of the Carcano. I will say that for sure. But yeah, I guess that's that, folks. Well, I've recently also rebeat Red Dead. I can't wait for Kiara to start playing it, in however long it takes Yakuza to finish. I'm assuming Yakuza apparently will take like 6 months to a year, based on what I'm hearing about its length. But until then, I guess I'll finally start playing Elden Ring now, because I never played that, and I got it on the Steam sale, and I also got a controller, so I guess I'll do that, and I'll experience that. So yeah, if you've never played Red Dead, I highly recommend playing it. It's probably my favorite game of all time. It's up there with the 3 best Western games of all time, are Red Dead 2, New Vegas, and Call of War's Gunslinger. Also Red Dead 1, if we're going to go with 4 best Westerns. Which are also, conveniently, my 4 of my top 5 favorite games. Baldur's Gate 3 has also slipped in there recently. Finally beating the streak I held for 5 years of my favorite games are all Westerns. But yeah. It's basically, imagine, if you've never played it, imagine the tone of Yakuza with the gameplay of GTA, but in the world of Breath of the Wild. You see, I love the complexity. I love being forced to go slow, because I love fighting the game, Like, there's so much stuff that, like, I know a lot of people complain about, like, oh, you left your, oh, I forgot my rifle on my horse. I gotta go run back to my horse to get my rifle. I only have my pistol to win this gunfight. To me, I live for that. I live for, oh no, I'm getting attacked. I forgot, but I don't have my rifle because it's on my horse. The only gun I have on me is my one pistol. I gotta hide and cover and try to hold them off with this pistol. That, to me, adds so much narrative richness in my mind. I really love that for, like, which is why for GTA, I've always wanted, or like Mafia or something, I've always wanted, like, concealment to be a thing. Like, you play, like, Mafia or whatever, and, like, you can just pull, like, a Tommy gun out of, like, your coat pocket. I want, like, to be able to be like, okay, I have to carry the shotgun in, like, the car trunk. But, like, my pistol, I have, like, tucked into, like, a shoulder holster, like, under a jacket, like, stuff like that. And then, to where, like, yeah, really concealment matters. More kind of immersive sim element added to it. Which, New Vegas does with the holdout weapons when you go into the casinos. You can have some guns that are small enough that you can hide them on your person when you go to the casinos, when you drop off your, like, rifles and shotguns at the door. But yeah, I could go on for hours and hours and hours about narrative dissonance with video game weapons and things like that. And just the narrative perspective of weapon use in general and what weapons are used when, why they're used, what that means for the character using them, all things like that. But we're about to hit 3 hours and 45 minutes, so I guess I won't be doing that today. But thanks for stopping by and talking in chat, folks. It's been a while since I've streamed, just because I've been busy with Kiara and Ofi and stuff. But yeah, maybe I'll stream some stuff in the Kiara break time. Who knows? Yeah, so I guess to the loading screen.